This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
I didn't hear too many bullish cases for China in 2025.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump took steps on everything from TikTok to the southern border.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. An interesting day. And to me, looking at the markets, Paul, it's just real simple. Ed Yardeni in a note saying, is the last 2 days, is it a bottom?
Right. I don't know. I mean, I kind of saw yesterday a little bit of a stabilization day, if nothing else. I'm not sure.
Got through the day.
We got through the day. We got through the day without any tweets kind of upending the marketplace here. So maybe we can focus on fundamentals a little bit here.
All the focus, of course, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., a conversation of Russia and the United States, hugely anticipated. Whatever your politics, whatever your outlook, we are so honored. Angela Stent scheduled to be with us in the 9 o'clock hour. On the data screen, I'm looking at the real yield. It ebbs higher here. Edges up higher, I should say, 2.00%. Paul, what are you looking for?
Yeah, looking at the yields here, Tom, we got a little bit of a stabilization in the bond market as well, Tom. The 10-year Treasury right there at 4.30%. So, again, a little stability in the trading today. A little bit futures off just a smidge here, off about 0.2%. Yeah.
VIX under 21. Bloomberg surveillance this morning. We're watched by BAM Mutual. They insure municipal bonds that finance essential infrastructure and provide guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Learn more about municipal bond credit quality. Visit bambonds.com, BAMBONDS, bambonds.com. And we thank them for their support. Right now, from the Interactive Broker Studios, we need a complete view of the Bloomberg business. Oh, she's looking. You're watching Dodgers Cubs, aren't you?
I'm sorry.
Lisa Mateo.
Gotta focus. Good morning. Yeah, we have futures lower this morning. This is investors. You heard it. Waiting that call between the U.S. and Russian leaders over Ukraine. Now, this comes as Bloomberg reports Russian President Vladimir Putin demands a suspension of all weapons deliveries to Ukraine. So right now we have Nasdaq futures down 0.3%, 63 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 94 points. S&P futures down 0.2% or 13 points. The 2-year yield 4.03%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.30%, and that is little change. European stocks on the rise. Investors awaiting the outcome of a German parliamentary vote. It's on a massive spending package. So taking a look at the stock 600 up 0.7%. We have the DAX in Germany up more than 1%. Commodities, gold climbing to another record. This is after Israel launched the airstrikes. Yeah, look at it. COMEX gold, $3,032 an ounce. Whoa. We go to oil advancing for a third day because of Mideast tensions on the rise. We have Brent crude up more than 1%, $71 a barrel. WTI crude, $68 a barrel. We're also tracking shares of NVIDIA. It's CEO Jensen Huang getting ready to deliver that keynote at the annual conference. 1 p.m. Wall Street time. In case you're interested, its shares are up about 0.3%. And BYD, Tesla's biggest competitor, still rising, up about 4% in Hong Kong. It unveiled this lineup of EVs that it said can charge almost as fast as it takes to refuel a regular car. Tesla down more than 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. A really busy morning here. We're going to go to Dubai right now. Joumanna Bercetche joins us now with a great overview of a view from 60,000 feet on all going on in Gaza, in Yemen, and of course the effect upon her Middle East. Joumanna, thank you so much in your evening for spending time with us. I believe in a 3-day period, I have attacks on Yemen, attacks on Gaza. How do the major Middle Eastern powers adapt? I mean, what does Saudi Arabia do and others?
Yeah, and you're also missing attacks on Lebanon and Syria as well, in addition to skirmishes on the Syrian border. So yes, there's been plenty going on in the Middle East in the last few days, a real escalation of things since where we were in January 19, which is when that ceasefire in Gaza kicked in, phase 1 of the ceasefire. I think it's safe to say at this point that the ceasefire is pretty much dead. There is no evident commitment, either from the part of the Israelis or from Hamas at this point, to want to continue with the ceasefire in its current format. And that came to light in the last 24 hours. The death toll obviously climbing. The latest figures from Gaza Health Ministry showing that more than 400 people were killed in yesterday's airstrikes. But you did ask about the broader Arab region. And the thing is, let me also just rewind it back to not just discussions that were taking place vis-a-vis how you move from phase 1 of ceasefire to phase 2, but also those broader discussions amongst the Arab League around the eventual reconstruction of Gaza. And that was in response, you may recall, to Trump's Riviera proposal, where the US administration essentially said to Arab states, if you want to be involved in Gaza, give us your counterproposal. And now it appears to be the case that this is such a remote possibility. You can't even think about reconstructing when airstrikes are still a daily feature of the lives of Palestinians, and where Israeli hostages are still being held in captivity by Hamas. So we really seem to have gone back to square zero again with the events of the last 24 hours.
And Joumanna, during the ceasefire, the exchange of hostages was taking place maybe at a slower pace than people would have liked. What happened from the perspective of Hamas to refuse to release the remaining hostages? What changed?
Yeah, so the initial ceasefire was composed of 3 phases. The first phase entailed the release of around 30 hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, and that part of the ceasefire actually expired a couple of weeks ago, so exactly 17 days ago. One of the other preconditions was for the IDF to withdraw away from populated areas in the Gaza Strip, but to maintain a buffer zone. And there was also an understanding that they would start within the middle of phase 1 talks around progress to phase 2, where Hamas would release the rest of the hostages. It is estimated that 60 hostages are still held with Hamas, about half of them still alive, and that Israel would fully retreat from the Gaza Strip. Now, the U.S. said that the discussions between the two sides were not yielding any fruit, so they put forward this bridging proposal, which would allow for an extension of phase 1 while they worked out the details of phase 2. But the sticking point is that Israel wanted the full demilitarization and to completely decapitate Hamas's capabilities in the Gaza Strip. They didn't want to allow that to happen. So they held back on releasing the hostages.
For our audience, particularly waking up in America, good morning on your commute across America this morning. The fundamental issue, whether someone's vision is back to 1967 or dare I say back to 1948, is a completely intractable situation. And the heart of the matter is, I guess, I'm speaking as an amateur, you're the pro, where do the Palestinians go? Where would the Middle East like the Palestinians to go?
Well, the Middle East would like the Palestinians to live and thrive within, ultimately, what would be defined as a Palestinian state. So remember, the position from all of the Arab states is that there needs to be a credible path towards a two-state solution. The last carrot in the region is Saudi Arabia, and we've talked about this in the past, before October 7, there were talks going on behind the scenes about a potential normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. But given the events of the last 18 months, Saudi Arabia have held back now and said, we're not going to sign on anything unless there is an actual credible plan to get to that two-state solution. And even in the response of the Arab community after Trump's Riviera proposal, which I think was quite telling in itself, in that they reconfirmed that there should be no forced displacements of Palestinians out of the Palestinian territory under no conditions. There has to be a credible reconstruction plan. But then many more moderate Arab states in the region will say they also don't want to see Hamas in a governing position in the Gaza Strip as well. So there also is a matter of governance in order for the money and the reconstruction appetite to come in.
Joumanna, thank you so much for the time today. Joumanna Bercetche leading all of our Middle Eastern coverage from Dubai this morning. Right now, futures at -13, the VIX nicely under 21. Pa, it is a crushing sell-off. Our SPX drawdown, are you ready?
Yep.
7.7%.
There you go.
It's a terrible drawdown.
What are the traders doing out there? Stuart Kaiser joins us. He's head of U.S. equity trading strategy at Citigroup. global markets. Stuart, what do you hear on your desk? What are your traders telling you? What are your clients telling you about what was at its trough, about a 10% pullback in the market? A healthy step in an otherwise okay market, or something different?
Well, I mean, I think most PMs would rather not have that type of healthy step. But yes, I think, look, position de-risking, I think, is the discussion point, around Wall Street over the course of the last month or so. It does seem like that's later innings. Clearly there were policy and uncertainty things that triggered that. But the big pullback, I think, had much more to do about de-risking than it had to do with anything sort of on the data side necessarily.
And one can say that, boy, you insert any kind of uncertainty into a market that was as richly valued as we were at its peak, then a pullback should not be that surprising. Do we have more to go, do you think?
I mean, look, I agree with you 100%. I think coming into the year, you would have said, yeah, fundamentals underlying the market pretty solid, but risk reward around those fundamentals pretty poor. So having, a pullback of that nature, probably not surprising. Is there more to come? I mean, I think if you believe that a lot of this was driven by policy out of Washington, and the key administrators down there are telling you basically to hedge, and that there is more to come, and that they're willing to tolerate some short-term pain for these longer-term structural reforms, then yeah, it does feel like there's potentially more behind this. Obviously, we've gotten a couple days of calm here, which is welcome, but it's hard to think that the headlines that have driven this are finished.
Within your vast experience, which goes back to the McKinley presidency, Stuart Kaiser, if you have a drawdown like this, do you see a snapback like in 1987, or is it a more protracted recovery?
It's a good question, Tom. I think a lot of people are citing the late 2018 period where you kind of had a drawdown, then you had a couple weeks of a bit of rally and stability, and then in December of 2018 we sold off again. So that would be your bear case, I think, or your bad outcome, because back then you had a growth scare and you had concerns about a policy error from the Fed. If you just swapped out Fed for White House, you'd be kind of a similar situation right now.
This is brilliant, because then Ben Laidler, when he was at HSBC, called the bottom of the market Christmas Eve of 2018. How do you know when to step in?
It's a great question. I think the early stages of when to step in, I think in this case, were going to be driven by price action, because it was more about positioning. If you were being very positive, I think you would have said last Tuesday was the day to step in, because you had tech stocks up in a down S&P tape. Bigger picture, though, I think you need to get through the budget and tax negotiations over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks to really be on a more solid footing.
Paul, the thing I'm missing here, you remember Stuart Kaiser in season 2, episode 4 of Industry.
Exactly.
Stuart Kaiser was yelling at the troops and industry, we need catharsis. We need catharsis.
We need catharsis.
Where is it?
Yeah, I'm not sure we've seen it. Stuart, I'm looking at the earnings outlook for the S&P 500. It's kind of like 9, 10, 11% kind of earnings growth for the next couple of years. Are you guys comfortable with that, or is there risk to that, do you think?
Our Scott Cronin on our equity strategy side does see some risk over the next few weeks of some downward revisions going into earnings season. I would say this: if corporate America, given all the uncertainty and everything that's happened over the last 3 weeks, comes out and defends numbers, that's going to read very, very positive. But particularly the parts of the market that have a little bit more of a China supply chain, Scott and team do see some downward pressure on numbers there. So we would expect to see estimates come a bit lower. To your point, very solid growth and very little negative revisions to begin the year. So I think, 1Q earnings is going to be interesting. If corporate America steps in and defends, then that's very positive. If they kind of kitchen sink this, just to get any bad news out there, then the market's clearly going to be under a little pressure during earnings season.
I knew Scott Cronin when he had an honest job selling my research on the West Coast.
Exactly. It was like a real job.
Exactly. So, Stuart, are you finding your clients are kind of going, they'd love to buy the Mag 7 or the tech stocks on a sell-off, or are they rotating into financials or industrials or something that may be a little bit more safer, just from a valuation perspective?
Well, I think in terms of like the cherry picking or the bottom picking, the focus has been more on tech, just because that's the stuff that's sold off the most. Big picture, do you want to broaden out this market? Yes. Are you going to do that at a time when U.S. economic growth looks a little wobbly? Perhaps not. So I would say the bottom picking or the buying the dip we've seen has been much more in the tech growth and momentum stocks that have sold off the most, because that's where the valuation is rebased. If you liked, Tesla down 25%, you probably love it down 50. So I think people are sort of focused on that part of the market right now for the buy the dip mentality.
How do you fold in economics now? Like if I've got nominal GDP coming in, if I got real GDP coming in, that affects the Stuart Kaiser world, doesn't it?
100%. And I would say the risks on that side to us are all on the labor side of the economy. I think.
Okay, so where do you go on a sector basis? I'm running out of time, Stuart, and I think people want to know, how do you shift your sector trading analysis given that diminished GDP? Yeah,
look, if you're slowing the economy, then you want to be not in the consumer-facing parts of the market, in our view. So I think if you're China exposed or consumer exposed, which a lot of retailing is, that's the part of the market you want to be the most careful about, without a doubt. I think U.S. consumer has been the white knight of the global economy for years. If we start to see cracks there, which we are seeing on the confidence side of things, then that to me is the part you want to be the most careful with.
Stuart Kaiser, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. It was Citigroup this morning to get us started here on the equity markets. Let me give you levels on the close. Let's do the close. 42,000 on the Dow, 5,700 SPX. NASDAQ is 19,900. I'm rounding there to get you. It's too early in the morning to get to single digits. I'm rounding. That's the way we roll here. And what I see is a market, like Stuart Kaiser said, 2 days in a row up. And you see it in the VIX. Remember, we were at a 28 level on the VIX. We did not get to 30. And we come in nicely, 20.77. I'll tell you, 19 VIX would be something there. We're not there yet this morning, but 20.78 on the VIX. Lisa mentioned it, Paul, 3,032 on gold.
Yes. How about that?
What does Goldman Sachs do when we get to 3,100?
Yeah, we're
by
getting
the
right
time
towards
Carol and Tim come on today.
Exactly right.
We'll have to see. Right now, with the news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Russian President Vladimir Putin is demanding a suspension of all weapons deliveries to Ukraine during a ceasefire proposed by U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. That's according to people with knowledge of the matter speaking to Bloomberg. Putin has made the halt to arms supplies a prerequisite for signing up to the ceasefire, and the minimum aim is that the U.S. aid should stop. The two leaders are set to speak by phone today about ending the war in Ukraine. The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas appears to be over. The Israeli military launching a wave of airstrikes across the Gaza Strip this morning, hitting Hamas targets in the first major attack since the ceasefire took effect in January. Israel's United Nations ambassador Danny Dunnan.
Let me be very clear. Israel will not stop until all of our hostages are back home. We will make it very clear to the Security Council that if they want to stop the war in Gaza, they have to ensure that the hostages are coming back to Israel.
Hamas said more than 400 people have been killed, while many others are missing since the airstrikes began. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has announced that a Houston area midwife has been arrested and accused of providing illegal abortions, marking the first time authorities have filed criminal charges under the state's near-total abortion ban. Maria Margarita Rojas has been charged with the illegal performance of an abortion, a second-degree felony, as well as practicing medicine without a license. Finally, the SpaceX Dragon carrying Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore is undocked from the International Space Station and is now headed back to Earth.
Undocking confirmed. Freedom is free of its moorings. Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore begin their belated trip home.
Williams and Wilmore were supposed to only spend about 8 days on the ISS, but their return got delayed for about 9 months. They are due to arrive just before 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Okay, what do we do? End of the fourth, and they got a no-no going. Dodgers, no hits, deep into the fourth inning.
Yeah. Well, Cubs are up 1-0.
I mean, Paul, do we simulcast the game at the Tokyo?
Why not? Exactly.
This is pretty cool. NFL football is desperately trying to get a foothold in London, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they've been here for years. Yeah.
But it's American tourists flying over to London. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of Americans going over. This baseball game in Tokyo is Japanese driven. I mean, it's really something.
They love baseball there. I mean, they've always had that for a long time.
I'm looking for, it's like the late Bob Uecker in the front row. I'm looking for Rupert Murdoch in the front row. I don't see him. Thanks to Fox for covering it. I'm on some kind of preview pass. I think at 27 minutes from now, boom, it goes away. Very cool. We got a no-hitter going here right now. The Cubs no hitting the Dodgers into the fourth inning is well. Bracket update. I did my bracket.
I did mine.
And now I got to rewrite it. Retweet. You know what was the dumbest thing I did, Paul? You had to have a shot at tequila when you saw my bracket.
I can't wait to
Grand
see it.
Canyon, huh?
The Lopes of Grand Canyon. Phoenix.
Who will be the Cinderella team this year? That's the question.
Now I saw Yale playing. Is it Texas A&M?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. I think I picked the A&M on that one. I think for just men. Just
Yeah.
you got to go there. I mean, but at Yale, I don't know.
Now let's talk. Let's we get 30 seconds here. St. John's is the real deal, but are they like in the group of say 8 teams favored?
I have them in the Final Four.
I do too.
Yep. I'm buying all into Rick Pitino.
We are.
I'm not gonna lie, I haven't started yet. I gotta really go because I work backwards. I work, who's gonna win. Well, as you see, the way I work, is I start who's gonna win, and then I work backwards the other.
Right. And Lisa, how's your bracket going?
It's non-existent.
But you've got a couple of days. You got BRKT.
Come on,
Okay.
got to be in there, Lisa.
All right.
Got to be in it to win it, Lisa.
Give me some tips on the live chat, please.
Grab Scarlet Fu in the food court.
Yeah, yes.
And you'll beat the three of us in no time. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Matei. We've got futures pointing to a lower open. This is as the Fed kicks off a 2-day meeting on interest rates. Policymakers expected to hold rates steady tomorrow. Today, more economic data. We have a read on housing starts, building permits, industrial production, and the import price index. Ahead of all this, we have NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, S&P futures down 0.2%, Dow futures down 0.1%. The 2-year yield 4.04%, little changed, and the yield on the 10-year 4.31%. That's up 1 basis point. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change, and we have Bitcoin down nearly 1.5% at just above 82,000. Few companies making news this morning. Alphabet said to be restarting talks to buy cybersecurity firm Wiz for $33 billion. Comes after calling off those discussions last year. And crypto exchange Gemini naming Dan Chen as CFO. He previously led capital markets bank partnerships over at a firm. Gemini considering going public as soon as this year. And as the Dodgers and Cubs battle it out in Japan, Bloomberg reporting U.S. fans flocking to the country because a weak yen is making baseball bargain again. That is the story. And it's peak tourist season. Yes, it's cherry blossoms. You got to remember that.
This is a discussion.
Yes, that is your Bloomberg Business Report.
Huge deal right now. I was not aware of this.
Big.
It's like the place to go. We'll see. The yen not where it was at 160, but the yen strengthening here over the recent weeks. I got a 140, make it a 150, 150 yen. Euro out to 109.32, stronger euro. And then, Mexican peso backs up. I got a 20 print on Mexican peso. Good morning to those in Mexico this morning. We're doing this in the 7 o'clock hour because it's so important. It's a think tank piece. This is off Thematic Bank of America desk, and it's 62 pages of absolute brilliance on where you're going to be in 5 years. The title's The World in 2030. I can't even get out to 4th of July.
Yeah, I'm thinking lunch today.
Exactly. Haim Israel with us right now with Bank of America. Haim, this could be a 4-hour discussion. We got to squeeze it in here quickly, and I'm going to start right with your lead. Technology is eating the world. With your think tank piece, are you long Mag 7?
Well, what I'm saying is the technology definitely is going to change everything. We are just at the beginning of the AI revolution. It's going to be bigger than the internet. It's going to be bigger than the smartphone. We are just now starting to understand how that's going to change our life. And we are definitely going to see way more investment than we've ever seen in the past.
Every website, every website says that's great, but we're going to lose our jobs. Do you look at AI as a job substitute?
Definitely. Yes, we can't avoid that. Every time there was a new technological revolution, jobs have been created and job has been vaporizing from the market. And this is exactly what's going to happen this time around. It's going to be eventually it's going to be a net addition. We are big believers that more jobs will be created than jobs that will be lost, but we will need very different skills in the future. This is going to impact for the first time white collar. The changes are happening very, very fast, and we'll have to start rethinking our skills, what we need for jobs. Do we need to be book smart? How the education market, how the universities are going to be built up to that. Many, many things will change. I don't need to be book smart anymore. I have a device, I have a machine that's going to be so much smarter, can do better analysis than me, and I need to think about other skills that I will need to do my jobs. So yes, we are definitely seeing massive disruption coming.
Is globalization over, Chaim?
I think the deglobalization trend will accelerate and will accelerate dramatically because what we're calling the tech wars. We've been in a deglobalization trend ever since the COVID pandemic. And this is going to accelerate quite dramatically because what happened because of the AI revolution is that countries, especially the United States, that is the leader of this revolution, is isolating itself and trying to keep the technology in-house, onshore, and protect it as much as it can. Other countries, other regions that will want access to technology will have to come to the US. But as a result, what we'll see much more protectionism. We'll see much more isolation of the technology. So we are big believers that this will continue. This will be a trend going forward. It's not going to be the end of globalization, definitely not. But we are not going to go back to open borders as we've seen 10 years ago.
Does that mean higher inflation? Because presumably globalization, if it did nothing else, it just lowered the cost of production. So does that mean higher inflation for the world?
We're heading into a world of high inflation because the amount of investment that we will need for this revolution are huge. Plus, because of the deglobalization trend that we're seeing right now, relative advantages are going to have to be rethink and we'll need more and more investments. Just to give you the number out there, if we are talking about all the investment that we'll need between natural resources, water, energy, infrastructure, we're talking up to $94 trillion of infrastructure gap. That's give or take world GDP in the next 20 to 25 years. This is a lot of investment. This is inflationary, and we'll see more and more investments. We actually are big believers that after this 10 years of massive investment for this revolution, we're actually heading into a deflation environment, one of the most deflationary environment in human history, because if we use this technology in the right way, we can have so much more.
I know you and Michael Hartnett are sitting around looking at this within an historical perspective. Chaim Israel with us now, Bank of America folks, with some really great research thinking about where you are in 5 years. And this is great, but in the 19th century, I'm guessing 1830, United Kingdom or Britain, there were the Luddites. Who are the Luddites today, and what is their power to push against the technological change?
The power to push against technological change, first and foremost, human nature and regulation. I don't think they exist today in terms of acceptance of the technology. Regulation is very, very far behind. More than that, I'm not sure that many countries have an interest to limit the technology because it's very powerful and has a lot of advantages if we will use it in the right way. So I don't see regulation. I see societies embracing it across many different aspects, and well ahead of regulation this time around. Like any technology that we've seen in the past, like any revolution that we've seen, so first and foremost, the winners are the picks and shovels. Like the gold rush, like everything else, the picks and shovels are always the winners over here. So we need more investments. We need way more infrastructure around that. We need to rebuild a lot of the things, and like the picks and shovels back in the 18th century, those are going to be the winners over here.
I'm Israel. Thank you so much. Congratulations on your research at Bank of America. Just thinking about 2030. Have you framed out in your mind 2030? Full disclosure, I have not.
I have not. I just saw some reporting on the Bloomberg terminal and elsewhere about the declining birth rates. We've heard about it before in China.
Demographics,
and the demographics is an interesting story. In the U.S., birth rates are declining as well. So that kind of goes to one of the bigger long-term issues, just the aging of the world's population, the aging of the U.S. population.
It's a huge deal.
Who's paying for this stuff? Who's taking care of the boomers and stuff? I don't know. Big issue.
Nobody's taking care of us. I don't think so.
I'm working to the day I drop, so that's
they're doing
going.
this or doing
exactly.
that. And it's a huge deal, folks. We'll do some more of this as we enter into 2025. Futures deteriorate -13 to -18 right now. The VIX 20.92 as well. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, we welcome all of you on your commute across the nation. Of course, on Sirius XM channel 121, and also on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on YouTube. I read a summary of the 20th anniversary of YouTube last night.
Really?
Thank you, Digiday, for Digiday's a fabulous website. And it's a 20-year, and just amazing statistics. And the one I still can't get used to is the use of TV for YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's growing like leaps and bounds. And people even watch, like Lisa has the shorts out, like when she's shopping at Costco.
Yep.
Shorts in aisle 5. People watch the shorts on TV.
Yeah.
Which I had no idea.
Yeah, that's where the folks are spending their time.
It is. Good morning.
And the advertising dollars associated with YouTube are just massive for Google. So they're
for them. But how does everybody else get paid? Excuse me. Is Lisa Mateo a creator?
Yes, I think whether she likes it or not, I think she's a creator.
I think it'll change when my kids start watching YouTube on the smart TV. That's when I know it's going to be a big change, because they still watch on the phone. A lot of people still doing their
phone.
Or the laptop.
Lots of laptops.
But when they start to switch to the TV, that's like a big thing.
I'm just trying to get them to pick up a book.
Good luck.
We only have one TV in the house now.
That's it? Only one?
Only one.
Okay.
Yep.
I have 2. That's about it.
Well, we're here today with the markets open. We're into the Fed day tomorrow. I can't think of a Fed day with less anticipation.
But you'll be there.
We'll be there at
John
1:30.
Farrell, Lisa Bromwitz, 1:30
the Fed
p.m. Wall Street time.
decides.
The Fed
And,
decides.
again, it could be a surprise. This is when a Fed can act. So we'll see how that goes. Let's do a data check right now. We do that on the 2-year yield, the Sweeney yield, nicely over 4%, 4.04%. Futures at -18. And the Dodgers with 3 runs in the 5th inning.
Oh, really? Okay, very good.
They're world champions. Dodgers 3, Chicago 1, the Cubs 1. At the Tokyo Dome, good morning, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by IBKR. Will U.S. natural gas production exceed 3.27 billion cubic feet in January 2025? At IBKR Forecast Trader, the yes recently at 9%. Check the data, spot the trends, and start predicting today at ibkr.com/forecast. We've got futures pointing to a lower open. Bank of America said investors slashed exposure to U.S. equities by the most on record in recent weeks. We have NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, S&P futures down 0.3%, Dow futures down 0.2%. The 2-year yield 4.04%. That's little changed, and the yield on the 10-year 4.31%. That's up 1 basis point. Gold reaching another record. We have COMEX gold $3,036 an ounce. We go to oil higher. Brent crude at $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. And the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index little change. Checking back in with NVIDIA. Shares ahead of the words from its CEO Developers Conference. A lot of people call that the AI of Woodstock. Its shares are down about 0.5%. And shares of Spain's largest bank, Santander, up more than 2% in Madrid. This is after making a big push in the U.S. through a partnership with Verizon. And the boom in healthier soda alternative continues. Sources say actor-producer Ben Stiller planning to launch a low-sugar soda named Stillers. What else? That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. When we invented Bloomberg surveillance, on a day like this where Russia and America will speak, we always said we would get conversations from true experts. Angela Stent, scheduled to be with us, her book of the year for me, I believe it was 2023-24, Putin's World. And we start strong this morning with Richard Portis. If you don't know the name, he is absolutely definitive in the Western study of Russia, his work at Yale, his work at Oxford, and all I can say is at London Business School, definitive this morning. Professor Portis, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg. I want you to describe the Putin that nobody in the Western press talks about, which is a swirl of understanding of his belief of the Russian past wrapped around the Russian Orthodox Church. I don't see this anywhere, and yet you're expert on it. Explain the relationship of Putin mythology with the Russian Orthodox Church.
Well, you're quite right to ask the question, but I think it's a very complicated question to answer. It goes back to his conception of the Great Russia and Russian destiny, and that is tied up with the church, of course. But is he taking any instruction from the church? Certainly not. Is he doing anything that is motivated by the church? Certainly not. So I think that's, in a way, should I say, a red herring? But what he is doing is, of course, trying to deal with Trump over the heads of the Europeans. And that's what's going to be the key issue today. If they tried to strike a deal, and, for example, the latest I see is that Putin is going to ask for a complete stop in arms supply to Ukraine. There's no way the Europeans are going to buy that. So the issue is a big one for the main European players, for Macron, for Keir Starmer, both of whose popularity has risen considerably with their handling of this crisis.
I look, Professor Portis, at this, and I'm trying to figure out how Ukraine fits in, again, to the Putin mythology. Is Ukraine part of the Soviet Union? Is it part of the era of Peter the Great? Is it the 19th century Russia? How does he see Ukraine fit in to the Moscow regime?
Well, he sees it as indeed part of a greater Russia. By the way, Belarus is also part of a greater Russia. And there are a few others out there, like the Baltic states. So the greater Russia is indeed a historical concept, and he really believes that it is his destiny to reconstitute it. But he's doing that on the basis of a very weak economy. If you look at the Russian economy, it's about the same size as the economy of Spain, Wow. And it's a war economy now. And if the war really were to wind down, which I'm not clear he wants, if the war really were to wind down, the Russian economy would collapse.
So, Professor Portis, in this call today between Trump and Putin, President Trump and President Putin, do you feel like one side or the other has any appreciable leverage over the other?
Oh, Putin's got the cards, partly because Trump is willing to let him play them, and he's playing Trump, but Trump seems to think that's just fine, and that maybe he'll get a Nobel Peace Prize out of this. But as I say, I think the Europeans are not going to play ball with the kind of a deal that Putin has in mind, and that's going to be a big area of conflict between Europe and the United States, potentially, if Trump tries to pursue it. But he's already in conflict with Europe in all sorts of ways, like Greenland, for example, and he's in conflict with Europe about tariffs, and that's going to get nastier. So he's winding up conflicts all over the place.
You talk about in Russia, I know in your work, you talk about, you just mentioned the economy and the weakness of the economy, the state of the economy. Talk to us about the brain drain that Russia has seen over the last several years.
Huge brain drain. Happens that actually the new dean of London Business School, Sergei Guriev, is a hugely distinguished Russian economist who founded the new economic school in Moscow and had to flee Putin's people, right? And he's just one of, as you say, several 100,000 very talented people who have dispersed all over the place. I mean, some of them are in the stands, some of them are in Dubai, some of them have managed to get themselves into the United States and here. But this source of talent, again, is how many of them would go back if Putin were to disappear, which he's not going to do right away, quick. How many of them would go back?
Right.
I don't know.
Professor Portis, one final question, if we could. Does President Trump represent an American projection to Europe and to Russia, or is it Trump alone?
That is a very good question. And I'm not clear over here that we are distinguishing between the United States of America and its current president. And that's partly because its current president has taken over the United States of America so completely without any serious challenges. So there, even in economic matters and tariffs and so forth, which is something that we watch a lot, he doesn't seem to be subject to any serious moderating influence. So that we're, I think, very concerned that the United States is leaving all sorts of multilateral arrangements, the ones that we've been engaged with in, whether it's the UK or the continent of Europe and the EU, and the breakdown of all those multilateral arrangements is something of great concern.
Professor Portis, thank you so much for joining us today. Richard Portis, the London Business School, but that barely describes his contribution to United Kingdom thinking this morning.
Yep.
Yeah, every time I dive into this, and folks, I've read like 6 books on Russia, which means I know nothing. But I dive into this, and it's surreal to me.
Yeah.
Like this call this morning is surreal, and I don't know why I feel that way, other than at 9 o'clock. We're supposed to have this historic call.
This historic call, and the question of one of the many questions is, what role will Ukraine itself play in this whole process here? I don't know that they are on this call. I've not heard that, seen that reporting. So, but at some point you would think they'd have to be involved. But this is a President Trump.
Ukraine is not involved in this call.
Not that I know
way.
of. Yeah, but we have a President Trump, who's very transactional. He thinks in the context of deals, and maybe we'll see if they can make some headway here.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have that coverage for you. Michael Barr leading our coverage there this morning. I do want to state that the window's 9 to 11?
Yes.
Michael, help me here. It's 9 to 11, but we really don't know.
We really don't know, but you're right. It is 9 to 11 o'clock.
Okay, so we'll see on that this morning. And Paul will have that into the 10 o'clock hour as well as we go. I assume the call's private. I guess there's a photo op, and we'll go from there. I don't have the details.
And I should add that it's 4 to 6 in Moscow, in Moscow time. So just
right.
yeah.
Yeah, but they're watching Dodgers Cubs in Moscow.
Well, yeah.
Dodgers, we'll have to see. We'll have that for you this morning. On your commute across the nation, good morning. It is Bloomberg Surveillance. We do economics, finance, investment, and today we do a little bit of international relations. From New York City, this is Bloomberg.
Now a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. I was looking at the Death Star. Becky Quick's over there with the DraftKings odds.
Oh, yeah?
On the NCAA. I'm looking this up right now. I think my whole bracket needs to be blown up. Let's go to the newspapers right now. Lisa Mateo with some chestnuts this morning.
Oh, Paul, you're not going to like this story, but okay, bear with me, okay? The experts are saying when it comes to setting up your brackets, do not pick Duke to win. Okay, the reason why, okay, this is within the Wall Street Journal, and the two writers of the article are actually Duke graduates, so just want to put that out there. They said you should bet against them. They say undervalued teams, that's who you should pick instead. Like they say, think like a value investor, right? You bet on the best, least popular team against the most popular team. Pick teams like, here you go, number 1 seed, Houston, another number 1 seed. Also value in number 2 seed, Tennessee, and number 3 seed, Texas Tech.
Really?
So that's what they're going with. So I don't know what's on your bracket.
I don't. Does anybody know? I mean, like in BRKT Go, there's like 4 people that get it. It's sort of like a Monte Carlo random kind of thing, isn't it?
Well, you just
4
pencil
people
in.
get
It's
it.
what I've done since 1989. You pencil in Duke to win it all, and you work back from there. And that's how you do your brackets.
The strategy.
It's worked 5 times
Sweeney.
for me. It's worked 5 times.
I haven't revisited mine this morning, you know.
But you never know. I mean, who won last year? It was a repeat. No, Connecticut.
Not me.
UConn.
Scarlet Fu killed it.
Oh, there you go.
Killed it. What do you got next?
Never know what can happen. Okay, so I'm going to stick with this March Madness theme, okay? I didn't even realize this, but Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has this big bracket competition where the winner can get $1 million. I didn't realize this.
Setting up right now.
The problem is that no one's won it, but he's trying for nearly a decade to give away this big prize. So the Wall Street Journal says that he wants to improve the odds, right? Because he says he's getting older and he wants to see a winner when he's still chairman. So he's making it easier to win. Because in the past you had to, be like had to call the first round perfectly, but now he's changing it up a little bit. Okay, so this year it can go to someone who correctly picks the winners of at least 30 of the 32 first round games. So you kind of have a better chance. He's an odds guy, so the odds are a little bit better. The person with the most correct games can win. You have tiebreakers too. The runner-up can get $100,000.
So this is like Damien Sassower territory.
Yeah, he's all
This is
over.
like something Damien would do.
Yep, exactly. He's a player.
But it's a big prize. So I didn't realize it's been
random.
doing this for years.
I don't get it. Next
one. Okay, sticking with gambling because you see the theme of today.
Oh, okay, it's very good.
Yes, here we go. Business Insider saying FanDuel launching a new show about gambling addiction. It's actually called The Comeback with Craig Carton. He's a recovering gambling addict. Airs on YouTube channel. It's streaming network FanDuel TV Extra. Didn't even know they had that. But they're going to be talking about their struggles with sports betting. So the company is saying it kind of adds to this mission of promoting safe gambling, with all the news and the headlines for it. But this is something.
But Paul, I mean, you're closer to this than I am. Don't they just have to shut down the addicts? I mean, that's what you do. They see in their computers that, young Mateo's on the couch addicted to this, and they shut them down.
I don't know how that works. But I mean, it just now, all I know is I was having breakfast this past Saturday at a local luncheonette, and there was a table of maybe 4 16-year-old boys, and they were talking gambling, what bets they were placing. That was disturbing to me. And I don't know. And they were speaking as if they were pros, taking the over here, the under here, the points, the spreads. I'm buying these odds. I'm doing, I don't know.
Yeah, my daughter's saying they're doing like during class. I'm like, what's going on in this place? I don't know. So it's a thing. It's another level. Yes.
It's a thing. I don't know how many states have it. 38 states or something, like 28 states. So I'll have to see.
Okay, update. Lisa Mateo, the newspapers. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate that this morning. World champion Dodgers 3. Cubs 1.
Ooh.
It's opening day of baseball, but it doesn't feel like. I mean,
no.
I think President Trump should throw out the first ball at Cincinnati. That would make me happy, but we're not there. So what do? You trot out the baseball songs. We had Frank Sinatra scheduled. He declined. So this morning, Mr. Combs will get us out to the baseball season.
Take me out to the ball game. Pick me up at the house. What's this every other weekend thing even all about? 'Cause mama says she loves you, and in some ways always will. I guess maybe things are different now, but Daddy, can't you still take me out to the ball game?
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What's the immediate take of a tariff war?
For the longest time, technology has been the driver of this market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump declared a national emergency at the U.S. border with Mexico.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. We are here 1 hour before a scheduled conversation. Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump, somewhere between the 9 and 11 o'clock window this morning. We'll bring you all of the photo opportunities of that. I assume a private conversation. We look at equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, futures -12. They're oscillating, but I got a VIX inside 21. That makes me happy. Paul, what do you see in the data this morning?
Yeah, Tom, just looking at some of the bond market movement here. We've got the yields up just slightly here, up about 10-year treasuries up about 2 basis points. We're at 4.31% on the 2-year. WTI crude oil pretty steady here at $68. And Bitcoin, it's off 1.7% today, 82,500 on your favorite cryptocurrency.
We're watching that. I mean, there's sort of a stasis and a churn to the market. Sort of mid-cycle here, away from earnings. We got some economic data. But that Fed meeting tomorrow, look to the Fed decides at 1:30 p.m. Tomorrow. Bloomberg surveillance this morning, brought to you by IBKR. Will the U.S. Consumer Sentiment Index, will it exceed 70.3 in March 2025 at IBKR Forecast Trader? The yes was recently at 29%. Check the data, spot the trends. Start predicting today. Do that at ibkr.com/forecast. And we thank Interactive Brokers for their support. Again, futures at -15. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we do have futures lower. Investors tracking the news flow from President Trump's call with Vladimir Putin today. And this comes, Bloomberg reporting Putin demands a suspension of all weapons deliveries to Ukraine. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.4%. S&P and Dow futures down 0.2%. The 2-year yield 4.04%. That's little change than the yield on the 10-year 4.32%. That's up 1 basis point. European stocks on the rise. Investors are waiting for the outcome of a German parliamentary vote on massive spending package. We have the stock 600 up about 0.7%. The DAX in Germany up more than 1%. Gold climbing to another record. We have COMEX gold at $3,036 an ounce. And as far as oil, advancing for a third day, we have Brent crude at $71 a barrel, WTI crude $68 a barrel. And today, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang will be in the spotlight, the company's annual developers conference. Now, he's expected to unveil some more about its next generation AI chips. NVIDIA shares shares are down about 0.2%. And shares of BYD, that's Tesla's biggest competitor, it's still high, about 4% in Hong Kong, and unveiled this lineup of EVs that it says can charge almost as fast as it takes to refuel a regular car. Wow. That has Tesla shares are down about 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Let's do a shout out, right? Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. We got to do a shout out before we get to Professor Harvey. The Tokyo Dome Fox broadcast is brought to you by Guggenheim.
Guggenheim. Guggenheim Partners, I guess?
The chairman of Guggenheim is Alan Schwartz. And may I suggest that he was a legit major league prospect.
And where?
He was injured. I can't remember the school. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Duke?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But Alan Schwartz runs Guggenheim. He is Guggenheim, of course, always the invention of Bear Stearns research. And he was the real deal. Like all of us talk about it, Alan Schwartz did it. And he was hurt as a kid playing baseball, but he was a real deal.
Duke University class of 72. Tom.
Great to see Alan Schwartz sponsoring a Tokyo Dome.
And you know what he was?
Out on Fox.
He was, when I was in the media business, he was the top media banker on Wall Street.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So
and,
good.
You know,
Bear Stearns.
There's a whole research combine at Bear Stearns. John Wrighting, David Malpass, Amy Shio, Terry Weissman, who we speak to from Macquarie. Right now, Sweeney went nuts yesterday. We have a 4 p.m. meeting where I hold a beverage choice in my hand. And you went absolutely mental and said, I need to do my bracket, and I need to do that with a professor of bracketology at Duke. Take it away, Paul.
Cam Harvey joins us, professor of finance at the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University. Cam, one of the things we're noticing here in this world of the last, couple of months and the uncertainty that's been injected into this marketplace is people still flock to gold here as, I guess, a safe haven. $3,037 per ounce here. What do you make of our friends buying gold here?
Yeah, so this is the subject of my research. And it's kind of interesting that there are two factors. There's kind of a medium-term factor and a short-term factor. So the short-term is the increase in uncertainty. The medium-term factor was what happened after Russia invaded Ukraine. And essentially, the US dollar was weaponized. So with the sanctions, it made it very difficult for Russia to do business because the numeraire currency in the world is the US dollar. And China took notice of this. So China strategically wants to de-risk, meaning that they need their own currency to be credible. They cannot continue to rely, as they have been, on the US dollar. So to ensure or to build the credibility of the Chinese currency, they've been buying gold. And given that there's a limited production of gold every year, like last year was 3,300 metric tons, that increase in demand has been driving the gold price up. So that is factor number one. And factor number two is unraveling today, given the uncertainty that has been induced by this new administration, that people are looking for a safe haven. And there is a strong perception that gold is a safe haven investment.
Can you have normal stock markets, a bid and an ask, with the tumult that we see right now?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So we are in like a minor drawdown, but my research looks at major drawdowns historically and identify 9 major drawdowns. So these are drawdowns where the market goes down by more than 25% from peak to trough. And it's interesting that in 7 of the 9 negative episodes historically, that gold actually has a positive return. In the other 2, gold has a small negative return. So think about that the market's down 40%, gold's down 2%. That's pretty good. So even in the times where it doesn't produce like a positive return, it does far better. So historically, it has been a diversifier. However, and this is really important, and most people don't fully appreciate the following point. Gold is volatile. So gold is as volatile as the S&P 500. So that means it can have very large drawdowns also. It means that it's not a safe haven for sure. It is historically a safe haven, but it can have very sharp drawdowns.
Should gold be a part of the average person's portfolio? We think about the 60-40 portfolio, and now people talk about alternatives need to be a meaningful percentage of that. Where's gold in an average portfolio, do you think?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot. So to have a diversified portfolio, you should have more than stocks and bonds. That's kind of obvious. And if you look at major institutional investors, they almost always have what they call kind of a bucket that protects them from the downside. And that kind of downside protect bucket often includes gold, but it's not just gold. So it's often a diversified set of commodities. It will include treasuries that are inflation protected. That's important. And perhaps some other real assets. So yes, I think that the average investor, just like the institutional investor, should have a diversified portfolio, and gold certainly does play a role in a diversified portfolio.
Professor Harvey with us, Campbell Harvey with us from Duke University this morning. We welcome all of you on your commute. We welcome all of you. Bracketology, and what is it, 11 miles between UNC and Duke this morning? 15501. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's our new digital experiment. We're humbled by the international reach of this. I featured the Mumbai Financial District today in their evening listening as well. But with Cam Harvey, he's looking at gold here. We should point out as we speak, gold at a number none of us have ever seen before. It's so I can't even find it on the screen. It's so lofty. Are you ready? $3,039. It's up a pop and $33 this morning.
Cam, I guess really over the last couple of months, what's been the key issue driving these markets has been just the talks of tariffs. When you get in front of your students down at Duke, how do you frame out tariffs as an economic policy?
So the first thing to realize is that the U.S. exposure to kind of trade is small. And what I do in my class is like a quiz question. If we look at trade exposure as exports plus imports divided by GDP, how does the U.S. rank in terms of 179 countries in the world? And it turns out that U.S. ranks 177. So it's got very low trade exposure. So think of imports as being only 14% of GDP. So it turns out that other countries have much more serious exposure to the U.S. policy than the U.S. So the issue, I think, is not just the tariffs, but the uncertainty about how the tariffs are going to be applied. So if we knew what the policy was, like 25% across the board, we could actually figure out the hit in inflation and the hit in GDP. And it is a hit. It is a negative, but it's not a large negative. And I think a lot of the problems are the tariffs on, tariffs off, and different numbers being thrown out. We just don't know. That creates uncertainty. Investors don't like uncertainty.
Cam, you've lived in the heart of the collapse of the American textile industry. I mean, in the Carolinas, maybe I'd also put it in the furniture industry as well. What do you say to the fancy elites at Duke University about all those jobs we lost to Asia?
Yeah, so this is globalization. And I think that a number of mistakes were made in the push for globalization. And now we're reversing some of those mistakes. So we have let other countries hold us hostage to critical minerals. So that's the sort of thing that you should not offshore. So we will be reshoring, repatriating certain key industries that we cannot afford to let adversaries have influence over us. So I think that the sort of laissez-faire, blind sort of push to globalization didn't take one critical thing into account that we think about all the time in business, and that is risk management. So a lot of this reshoring is going to be expensive. Right. So it means that to produce it in the US is going to be more expensive. And what that will do in the medium term is be pressure on inflation, but that extra expense is an insurance premium that we should be willing to pay to have these things produced within the US.
What does Mark Carney need to do for your Canada, Professor Harvey?
Well, obviously, Carney is highly experienced in terms of both business experience and central banking experience. My country, Canada, has effectively been in a recession for the last 3 years. And I say that not because of the headline GDP numbers, but if you calculate, and this is what people should do, calculate GDP on a per capita basis. And given the growth in population in Canada, we've had negative GDP growth. So we need somebody to come in and change the course because nobody wants to be in recession for years.
So how serious and how much risk do the U.S. tariffs as currently talked about, what's the impact on Canada? How big of an impact could that be on Canada? How concerned is Canada?
Yeah, so again, it's interesting. I said that the U.S. has very little trade exposure overall, with imports at 14% of GDP. I also did that calculation where I took the area, so Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. put together, and it's amazingly self-sufficient. And I think that a better idea for the U.S. would be to kind of strengthen the bond between Mexico and Canada and truly be sort of an area that is resilient to fluctuations that might happen across the world. For some reason, that is not the policy. And that's unfortunate. So that's going to cost, to some extent, U.S. growth and Canadian growth. But I do think that many Americans are not aware of the amount of business that the U.S. does with Canada. And it will be painful if those tariffs are imposed.
Cam Harvey, thank you so much with Duke University and those comments on his Canada this morning. Futures negative 12, now negative 18. The VIX stays quiescent 20.86 on the VIX. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Russian President Vladimir Putin is demanding a suspension of all weapons deliveries to Ukraine during a ceasefire proposed by U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. According to sources speaking to Bloomberg, Putin has made the halt to arms supplies a prerequisite for signing up to the ceasefire, and the minimum aim is that U.S. aid should stop. It comes as Trump will be talking with Putin today on the push for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
The U.S. is pressing for Russia to agree to a 30-day ceasefire that Ukraine has said it is ready to accept. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
We are on the 10th yard line of peace, and we've never been closer to a peace deal than we are in this moment. And the president, as you know, is determined to get one done.
But Putin has insisted on a number of conditions before any commitment. European leaders are worried now President Trump may concede too much on Ukraine's behalf in a direct exchange with Putin. They're pushing for security guarantees and a peacekeeping force to keep Russia from renewing hostilities. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The ceasefire in Gaza is over. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordering major airstrikes across Gaza. The airstrikes have resulted in at least 400 people being killed or missing. Retired General Doug Lute said the Gaza ceasefire was always fragile.
Phase one of the ceasefire was supposed to have been completed 2 weeks ago. on March 1st. So we may see a return to full-scale violence, and of course that spells a disaster.
Netanyahu says Hamas repeatedly refused to release the hostages. NASA's 2 stuck astronauts are finally on their way home after more than 9 months in space. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams left the International Space Station in a SpaceX capsule early today, checking out with the cosmonaut and astronaut. The capsule is due to splash down in the evening off the Florida coast, weather permitting. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. The desperation of TV, and I guess Fox picking up, the beginning of a convoluted opening season as well. And Paul, it's basically every sport, the NBA, hockey, all of them, even the NCAA, reacting to the success of the NFL. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the benchmark.
The NFL is now, a 12-month-a-year kind of story, a business, and they have their own television network, the NFL network. So, but it's just been extraordinary. And I think, the other sports are thinking about globalization. Why wouldn't you? Even though the rest of the world seems to be kind of onshoring and friendshoring, a lot of these sports leagues are thinking about the global stage and how can they get more revenue.
There's that scene in The Natural where Babe Ruth's on the train and they're out there. And it really captures, you took the train to a city and you were there for 3 or 4 days and Glenn Close would show up to be sure you were okay. But the answer is that we're playing too long a season versus the compression of the NFL.
Well, I've always said that. It's too long. I mean, you can shorten it up by almost
and maybe
a third.
The pitchers would not be so injured if it was shorter.
Make it like about 100 games. Make it 120 games. I'll take that. But we just go all the way,
It's fascinating to me where are we on the streaming wars? I mean, is anybody picking up baseball yet, or do we wait for those headlines?
Yeah, they will. I mean, now we've got some regional networks that are now going to be managed by Major League Baseball because
they're bankrupt.
Yeah, that one company that owned a lot of the that was a brand name, and so they went bankrupt. So a lot Major League Baseball had to step up here. But streaming has come. You can stream everything anyway. So and I saw the NBC Comcast just re-upped their Olympics through 2030 at another $3 billion or something.
So the Olympics still moves.
Staying on. Yeah.
Did Taylor show up at the Tokyo Dome?
I don't know exactly.
We'll have to see on that this morning. Futures negative 19. They deteriorate. The VIX 20.88. It is Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. All right, we are moments away from more economic data. We have housing starts, building permits, and import prices in just a few moments. It comes as the Fed kicks off its two-day meeting on interest rates. So ahead of it, NASDAQ futures down 0.4%. S&P futures down 0.3%. Dow futures down 0.2%. The 2-year yield at 4.04%. That's little changed, and the yield on the 10-year 4.31%. That's up 1 basis point. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.1%, and we have Bitcoin down nearly 1.5% at just over 82,000. Few companies making news. We have Google parent Alphabet. Well, it's agreed to buy cybersecurity firm Wiz for at least $32 billion. That's according to the Financial Times. And you have crypto exchange Gemini. It's named Dan Chen as CFO, and he previously led capital markets and bank partnerships at a firm. And finally, luxury giant Louis Vuitton in talks to open a 40,000 square foot mega store in Hong Kong. Sources say they're speaking with Hong Kong real estate company New World Development. It could have a museum, a cafe, and a lounge for VIP customers. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us right now, let's get right to it. Victoria Fernandez with us with Crossmark. She's the only one on the island of Manhattan this morning that has Houston going all the way.
That's right.
She could join us here.
All the way.
Texas. I love your research note. You just said, okay, when the facts change, I change. What have you changed to, given the recent turmoil?
Well, I think we've actually probably done the opposite of what many people think when we say we've changed. We were actually much more negative than most people coming into this environment. And so we look at it now and say, okay, I think we're in, yes, this correction. We pulled down 10% on some of the indices. But we're not so sure we're actually going into recession, and we actually thought we would see that. But we do think we're going to be in this extended period of negativity, of uncertainty. Consumers are going to pull back. You know, could we have this 3 to 5% jump from the pullback we saw last week from Thursday's lows? Yes. But do we think Thursday was the all-time low? I'm not so sure we can say that. You've got a lot of elements yet that we haven't seen in regards to put-call ratios and spikes in 20-day lows that we haven't seen. So maybe April 2nd is going to be a good day for us to look and see if we get a lower low.
So I guess that one of the questions is, uncertainty has certainly been injected into the marketplace, and everybody says market doesn't like uncertainty, and that has been one of the reasons for the pullback. Should we expect any of that to change going forward?
Well, it's not going to change immediately, not in the near term at least. And even if we look at earnings expectations, we've seen those come down a little bit for the first 2 quarters of this year. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I could see us start to firm up a little bit in the second half of the year, maybe late third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. When we see a plan, for me, it's more that, not that tariffs are going to be in place. We've been there and done that before. It's the fact that we don't know the plan. We don't know exactly what this administration is going to do.
So not someone sane and sound like you, but if you look at somebody more unstable like Robert Dahl, I'm going to say to Bob Dahl, where's the horizon? Because what Bob's going to say is look over the trauma to the horizon. How far out is the Victoria Fernandez horizon I need to look to?
Yeah, I'm thinking we're looking at least 6 months out. And when you look historically, when you've had that spike in the policy uncertainty index, you're about 5% up after 3 months, 10% after 6 months. And then a year later, you're getting up into those higher double digits, closer to around 20%. So I'm thinking we look about 6 months out to maybe start regaining that uptrend that we lost.
But are we in a bull market, or is it cracked?
I think it's cracked.
Really?
I do think it's cracked. I think we have kind of come out of that uptrend that we were in. We had 50% retracement levels. We traded below 200-day moving averages. To me, that means that's cracked a little bit. We've come out of that steady uptrend we were in. We need to regain that, and I think it'll be a little bit of time before we get it.
But Paul, as the cash flows change, like NVIDIA's something today's NVIDIA Day or something, has their cash flow changed?
I haven't seen anything, but what we have seen, Tom, is some consumer-facing companies like the airlines cut their guidance. A big broad-based retailer like Kohl's cut their guidance, and suggesting that they're seeing some weakness from the consumer. So we saw the retail sales yesterday. Boy, if the consumer starts to pull back, that's something different, I think.
Well, I think that's the key to all of this. And you look at the labor market, and to me, that's going to be your signal as to what consumers are doing. We've got underemployment hitting high levels. You've got employment to population ratios down, hiring down, all of these elements saying the consumer could pull back pretty strongly here.
We say good morning to you and good morning to Houston as well as you listen on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Sirius XM, all the other ways you do. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Just humbled by the growth there. Thank you, Digiday, for a nice summary of that. Can we do a shout out to Lawrence McDonald?
Sure.
Larry right now is lighting it up. He's over with Maria on Fox Biz.
Okay.
And he's got the massive double screen Bloomberg terminal on behind him. He's got the red stickies all popped up there for the headlines.
Yeah.
You know he's listening to Bloomberg surveillance there when he gets off the line with Maria Bartiromo.
I'm sure that Death Star loves that.
You know, Larry McDonald, I mean, he's just killing it there with the double. You don't get that from Victoria Fernandez. You get a shot of the plants in her living room.
Well, the good news is I do have Houston in my Final Four.
Good.
But I have them losing to Duke.
Oh,
there you go.
That's just right to the heart there.
How does
Tom.
Houston pick Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville? Good morning,
Powerhouse.
Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
The Fighting, I don't know what they are.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know.
that's the beauty of the
Do
tournament.
you know how lame we are, Victoria, in that some of these regional powerhouses, they're just so outside the New York City media purview that Houston might as well be on Mars.
I mean, that's
hate to say
crazy.
it,
Come
but-
on, guys. Yeah, you got to get on that
I'm right.
bandwagon.
We got to get out.
Go Cougs.
Got to get off this island sometime. Victoria, given all the uncertainty that we've talked about here this morning, how does fixed income fit into your portfolios today? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so we always look at fixed income as a component of everyone's portfolio. It should be there in some form or fashion, right? Depending on the risk tolerance and age and all of those things. But it gives you that steady cash flow that can help buffer some of the volatility that you're seeing in the equity markets. And when you can do short-term treasuries and still get 4.25 or 4.30 on there, why wouldn't you have a little bit of that in your portfolio?
On a sharp
to
ratio
assist?
basis, is that working right now?
It is
1
working
year,
right.
3 year sharps?
It is working right now, and you can actually partner it up with something a little bit longer out the curve, and that makes even a better proposition in your portfolio.
What are Crossmark clients actually doing? Are they in is it a mental panic every day? We're not hearing that from
No, it's not. We're not hearing that from our
Yeah.
clients. Now, obviously, we'll start doing, quarterly calls here in the next few weeks, and we'll see what people are saying. But we haven't been inundated with calls of concerns. I think because we've been positioning our clients more defensively all year with the expectation that we would see a pullback like this.
SIU Edwardsville, Tom. They're the Cougars. University of
Houston.
We're the Cougs,
The
yeah,
University of Houston is also the Cougars, so it's going to be a little confusing
Do either
there.
of them have a blue uniform so I can
We're
put them on
red.
bracket?
Houston's red. So.
I don't know, so we'll see.
Victoria Fernandez, thank you so much with Crossmark
Thanks, guys.
for that Houston update. Great to have her in studio with us this morning. We got a set of economic data out today at 9:15 where the Putin-Trump talks start. We have important industrial production. Before that, we've got export prices, import prices elevated this morning, export prices elevated as well. And in the housing market, well, we got a pop on starts. I'll give us that with a little bit of a negative revision. I'm going to say a more constructive housing market because Sweeney saw the mortgage rate come in from 10% to something better.
Well,
right?
Lisa's the big real estate guru these days. She's all over the place, multi-state.
Do you know that out her west window she can see the Mississippi River?
Is that right? That's how far west she is. Okay.
We'll have to see. The economic indicators here, Bloomberg's surveillance, all of our economics brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm, attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to Commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology as well. Futures fractionally do better, -11. I'm going to call it a nuance. Maybe it's almost like pre-Fed.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the Fed's going to do.
I'm not sure what the Fed can do here. I mean, I think it's a lot of it's coming out of the White House in economic policy.
And the headlines that we could see today, I mean, out of nowhere, the Kennedy Center yesterday, I don't even know what I can't articulate wisely on it other than it seems to be, starting like 10 a.m., maybe after this call, a set of headlines that devolves into moving the market.
Yeah, it could be. Again, around this morning, they will be having their conversation, Presidents Trump and Putin. So look for the headlines. We'll have full coverage.
Euro dollar 109.08. Sterling doesn't get to 130, 129.62 as well. Mexican peso goes from a 19 out weaker to 20.06 this morning. On futures, negative 11. Dow futures negative 66 and the VIX 20.71. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Some insight into the housing market. Housing starts for February came in higher than expected. The month-over-month forecast was for 1.4%, came in at 11.2%. Building permits higher than expected too. Import prices month-over-month, that came in higher at 0.4%. Right now we have Nasdaq futures down 0.4%. S&P futures down 0.3%. Dow futures down 0.2%. The 2-year yield at 4.06%. That's up 1 basis point, and the yield on the 10-year 4.33%, and that's up about 3 basis points. To commodities, gold reaching another record. We have COMEX gold at $3,041 an ounce. Over to oil, Brent crude $71 a barrel, up more than 1%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. We're going to check back in with NVIDIA shares. This is ahead of words from its CEO at its developers conference this afternoon. Shares down about 0.5%. And shares of Asia's largest bank, Santander, up more than 2% in Madrid. This is after making a big push in the U.S. through a partnership with Verizon. And NASDAQ could be planning a second U.S. headquarters. Sources telling the Wall Street Journal will be opening its first regional headquarters in Dallas. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash, Paul and Tom.
What do you think, Paul? These exchanges in Dallas, they're all going down there.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's a business-friendly space. There you go.
Okay, let's get right to it right now. Canadian CPI just came out, elevated to say the least. Previous 1.9, I don't have a revision yet, and it was to lift to 2.2. Forget about that. Explodes out to 2.6% year-over-year CPI. Mark Carney on his return from Europe is going to have to look at that within the Canadian-U.S. mess. Steve Lapley with us right now. He's with BlackRock, head of iShares Fixed Income. We're talking about equity flows into SPX yesterday. Are bond flows stupid as well?
Bond flows are amazing year to date. So we've shattered industry records in the last couple of months. I think people are just looking at the absolute level. And, we've round-tripped treasuries. If you look at where 10-year notes were about a year ago, we're not too far off. And so I think people have gotten accustomed to the noise and are just looking at it as a great opportunity just to invest. I mean, you have to weather the volatility, but yeah.
iShares fixed income ETFs have crossed $1 trillion in global assets under management. Just extraordinary there. Where are people going in the curve in your ETF space?
It's interesting. The broad categories have been kind of consistent over the last few years. So it's mainly still treasuries, broad multi-sector, high quality investment grade. But the mix has changed a little bit this year. I think people have gotten a bit defensive. So our number one flow so far this year is actually the very shortest end of the treasury curve in SGov. So that's taken in around $8 billion of our 28 so far year to date.
How much credit risk are your clients taking when you see the fund flows here?
Not a huge amount. Again, it's mainly very high quality. I mean, within high yield, you are seeing some positive flows, but more into defensive products like HYDB as an example. Investors are allocating broadly, but they are leaning into quality, it looks like.
When I buy a bond ETF, this came up 20 years ago when they trotted this stuff out, folks. Do I know what's in the portfolio, and is it fixed like an old Nuveen unit trust, or is it sort of squishy where I really don't know quarter to quarter what's in my fixed income ETF?
Well, if it's going to follow an index, you're going to see it evolve with the index as the index changes. But you can see the holdings every day. That's the really important
thing. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
you
could see them every day.
Full transparency every day?
Yeah.
Like 300 securities?
Or 1,000, or with the municipal products, you have thousands.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Every day lately shows up and I learn something.
My question is, where's all this money coming from? Are people getting out of their mutual funds and just going to this new wrapper ETFs?
There's some of that. I think there's a bit of
wrapper.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a bit of a preference where a lot of the model portfolios prefer ETFs as a wrapper. And so, for example, we've seen a lot of flows into our active funds like Bank, BINC, because of that model allocation. Right. The model portfolios prefer the ETF wrapper. So you're seeing some of that. I think a lot of it is just advisor money. You do see still quite a bit of institutional money that's less sticky, but it's pretty broad based.
When you sit there in your offices here and you have to look down at the evil horde in Pennsylvania, I mean, are you talking about basis point analysis? Are you guys down to where you're going, I think we got to cut half a basis point, 0.005%? Are you like in a price war like gasoline stations?
Yeah, I mean, I think
years ago?
we look at how our clients use the funds. We segment them based on those use cases. We understand, if they prize liquidity over longer term holdings, and we sort of price based on those use cases. That's how we look at it.
Right. I mean, Paul, remember like a bond was, it's a field goal.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you'd make a stick, which is 1 percentage point.
Yep.
Field goal is 3 points. And then they'd be like, yeah, we can do 75 beeps. And then we can do 49 beeps.
What do you guys think we're going to hear from our Federal Reserve this week?
It's interesting. We're in some pretty tumultuous times. There's a lot of headline volatility. I think they're going to be, they're going to stick to the message, right? They're going to, I think they're going to reiterate sort of a wait and see. Inflation has been a lot more sticky. I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, that we expected it to be a pretty bumpy ride and perhaps be a little more sticky than sometimes the market was expecting. I think we're kind of seeing that. Now, whether we have settled in at a higher level than, the much talked about 2%, not sure, but it's definitely proven to be a little more sticky. So I think they're going to advocate patience.
Steve Leppick, thank you so much for BlackRock here on iShares and fixed income. Nice update there. And the flows are titanic. I'm seeing it from Bloomberg, Art Balchunas, and others, Emily Graffeo. And it's absolutely stunning flows here as everybody 401ks up this morning. Futures, -17. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Russian President Vladimir Putin is demanding a suspension of all weapons deliveries to Ukraine during a ceasefire proposed by U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. That's according to people with knowledge of the matter talking to Bloomberg. The two leaders are set to speak by phone on today about ending the war in Ukraine, with a key objective being the 30-day truce that Kyiv has already said it's ready to accept. President Trump says he expects Chinese President Xi Jinping to visit Washington in the not-too-distant future. That's despite talks on tariffs between the two countries being stuck at low levels. Wendy Schiller is head of political science at Brown University.
He's already sort of conquered his own party. He's already conquered sort of the Congress. He may or may not conquer the courts. Now he wants to conquer the world. Why shouldn't the leader of China come and talk to President Trump? He's trying to establish the United States as a player in a very different way than we've seen for a very long time, but he's still trying to do that and establish power.
Brown University's Wendy Schiller was a guest on Bloomberg Daybreak. Israel launched airstrikes across Gaza, ending a nearly 2-month ceasefire with Hamas, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowing to act with increasing military strength to free hostages and disarm Hamas. Hamas says the airstrikes have resulted in at least 400 people being killed or missing. A federal judge in Washington pressed Justice Department lawyers on whether the Trump administration violated his order. The judge told the administration to hold off on deporting a group of Venezuelan migrants being removed under the Alien Enemies Act, a wartime law, but the migrants were deported anyway. On Air Force One, President Trump was asked if his administration violated the judge's orders.
I don't know. You have to speak to the lawyers about that.
Are you planning to do more deportations?
I can tell you this. These were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, operators.
An administration lawyer wouldn't answer many of the judge's questions, saying the judge had no right to the information. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Had a meeting yesterday. You go in a room, there's like 14 people in the room, interns I'd never met. You know, you can smell their badges so new.
Yeah, right.
You can smell the plastic. And the whole meeting was on Washington. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr, major shout out to our listenership at 99.1 FM in Washington. We're just absolutely humbled by the different statistics they have of what they're listening. You know, the foundation, we figured out where the largest listenership in Washington was.
Where?
They go to U Street Northwest, and I'm like, are you kidding? We're house music at Ben's Chili Bowl.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, you know, that's the way they play us live there. I mean,
very good.
We
Gotta
say
get
good
down
morning
there.
to Ben's Chili Bowl.
Looks like my kind of place.
The rest, but major, thank you, 99.1. And I got to admit, I mean, the truth is, this is anchored not by us. We could take a victory lap. It's one N. Hager.
Yep.
I hate to say it, but you know, I mean, you know, Nathan, you know, he's the one leading the way on Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow.
Yep, all
and
kinds
they're
of good
giving it
stuff.
Washington angle there. Good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, 92.9 in Boston, and Bloomberg 1130 in New York. Hope you survive St. Patrick's Day. Futures down 18.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene. We welcome all of you here with futures in negative 18. So it's an odd day. Do we agree it's an odd day?
I think so. We'll see. Maybe we'll get some readout from this call between President Trump and Putin this morning. We've got the Fed. You'll have full coverage of the Fed tomorrow, Tom. I'm not sure what they're going to say to change the narrative out there.
So what it means on an odd day, you have your surveillance name, image, likeness reporter in. Emily Grafeo joins us this morning. Well, I don't get Reddit because I'm just not a hipster like you. Is Reddit like a meme stock? Is Reddit like a legit portfolio stock? What is Reddit?
So, I mean, Reddit, it's definitely a legit company that a lot of people use. Is it a meme stock? It's certainly a platform that people use to discuss meme stocks. It's down 23% this year. So it's definitely not like a hot Mag 7 stock or anything like that. And actually there was, at least from Redburn Atlantic, a sell recommendation coming out today. from James Cordwell and Joseph Barker. They basically said that Reddit is very vulnerable to Google search, because if Google changes their algorithm, when you go to search a question, instead of the first page popping up being Reddit, if Google changes their algorithm, Reddit could be on the second page.
The Reddit challenge has got to do with new Google AI.
Yes, at least according to these analysts. And that
this is 2,200 employees. Lisa, do you use Reddit?
I don't, but I know a lot of friends do, and my sister does, and she uses it all the time.
How does she use it? Emily, do you use Reddit?
I'll Google a question, and then I'll put Reddit at the end of the Google search. So I like it.
Okay.
But again, you have to know that. You have to put Reddit at the end, because if you just Google best restaurants in New York,
okay,
if the Google algorithm changes, then Reddit is not going to pop up.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that, at least in their fourth quarter results, they actually said that a change in Google's algorithm attributed to their user growth slowing.
So many companies, Tom, have that risk. I don't care who you are. If Google changes the algo, it impacts your business. But I'm just looking at the revenue line for Reddit, Tom. Back in 2021, they had about $485 million of revenue. Forecasted this year, analysts, $1.8 billion.
Yeah, 2,000 employees,
how about that?
2,200. They're popping it, and they're flipping cash flow positive.
Free cash flow positive, so all the things you like here. What's the call here just on some of these tech stocks? What are you seeing out there in the marketplace? Are they still gravitating toward these tech names?
Certainly yesterday they weren't. We saw small caps higher.
Okay.
And it was interesting because all of the broader indexes were higher, but NVIDIA was down, Tesla's down. Is there, a broad-based exodus from tech stocks? I wouldn't say so. The ETF flows certainly show that people are still buying the dip.
Where are the ETF flows going? What's the hot new thing in ETF land that you guys are looking at these days?
Well, it's these mega cap tech stocks.
Still playing the game?
It's the Qs, it's the SPYs.
Right.
Yep.
You can look at the flows
That's
from...
what Balchunas was saying. So, it's just... And he says, the money's still coming in, Tom, even during the correction of the first... the funds, the flows into ETFs are still staggering.
Emily, we don't care. Did you do your bracket?
Not yet. I'm a little depressed.
Yeah, because UVA is not
even in it. I will do it, but
we need a complete revamp down in Charlottesville.
Yeah,
top to bottom.
They'll get there.
Okay. You've got the money, so that's not
Emily
a problem.
Bercetche, thank you so much. And let's remember a great story from 5-6 days ago on First Trust, really, really illuminating about the challenges of marketing within the securities industry. Futures deteriorate. Grafeo drives the market lower, -24 on futures. The VIX out over 21.36 this morning. Just like a pre-Fed churn as well.
Yep.
Okay, we're doing baseball for Dodgers Cubs.
Where are we now?
It was in Field of Dreams. Leave it at that. Chuck Lavelle, the Almond Brothers, Jessica.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
The president wants lower interest rates from Chairman Powell.
You can make the argument that this is a really rich market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
President Trump signing a wide range of executive orders.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, Bloomberg Surveillance from New York. Good morning across the nation. Good morning, St. Andrews, Scotland. Coming up, we'll talk to one of their esteemed graduates. It's so far north, it's like they can wave to Norway.
I know.
They do. They have a couple beverages. Mm-hmm. What they do is they go to the coffee house where William met Kate.
Okay.
And they sneak some, Bailey's rum in there or whatever, cream into it.
JMO.
they swim across to Iceland or someplace. Good morning. Good morning, Scotland. Thank you for being with us here. It's a pre-Fed churn. The tape deteriorates negative at 28. And we're now on a watch of Putin-Trump discussions.
And 9 o'clock Wall Street time is when I heard this thing was kicking off. So we'll see if, get two presidents to be on time. I don't know.
We're going to keep with our regular programming. Angela Stent will be with us from Georgetown as well with her expertise on Moscow and Mr. Putin. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning. We're brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Trade over 10,000 U.S. stocks and ETFs, U.S. equity index options, U.S. treasuries, and more. Do it on your timetable. Learn more at ibkr.com/around the clock. Thank you, Interactive Brokers, for foundational support. From the Bloomberg studio, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And after 2 days of gains, futures still pointing to a lower open. NASDAQ futures now down 0.7%, 142 points. S&P futures down 0.5%, 28 points. Dow futures down 0.3%, 153 points. We have the 2-year yield, 4.05%. That's little changed. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.31%. That's up 1 basis point. To commodities, gold climbing to another record. This is after Israel launched airstrikes against Gaza. So you have COMEX gold up more than 1% at $3,044 an ounce. We go to oil, advancing for a third day. Mideast tensions on the rise. We have Brent crude up nearly 1% at $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. Well, today, NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang in the spotlight, the company's annual developers conference. He's expected to talk a little bit more about its next generation AI chips. Its shares, though, are down about 1% ahead of it. And Google parent Alphabet acquired cloud security company Wiz for $32 billion in an all-cash deal. That is your Bloomberg Business
Is that a big deal?
Yeah, 32 large, all cash. Now the question is the DOJ going to approve this? Because I don't think Google can buy a paperclip without getting it passed by the DOJ.
Yeah, I think it's.
I don't know how they're going to do this.
And there's a dovetail between the Biden and Trump study of technology.
I think you're right. Yep.
They're not like disparate. They're sort of like an overlap.
Well, I have a note out that Jen Rhee at Bloomberg Intelligence, she does all the antitrust stuff. So we'll see what she comes back with.
You look for that. Paul Sweeney, Alex Steele, the 10 o'clock hour as well. We're going to squeeze this in right now. Skylar Montgomery Koenig with us with Barclays and foreign exchange. We've got Angela Stent on deck as well here as we await the Putin-Trump comments, I should say. I don't see anything right now across media. Skylar, is foreign exchange useful now in gleaning tariff dynamics? Like when you look at loonie or you look at peso, MEX, can you learn something there?
I think there's very, very little to learn in FX markets. I think there's very little priced in terms of tariff premium, and there are a couple ways you can see that. So one is we have a fair value model for euro dollar. We're pretty much at fair value on euro dollar. And you could say tariff premium is leaking into rates market, and so it's reflected in some way through fair value through that mechanism. But I still think there's very little price. And I'll actually say I think where the most concern about tariffs feeding to growth is prices in the U.S.
So I would think I'd see more strength in the U.S. dollar given all this uncertainty. But the Bloomberg Dollar Index is kind of down like 4.2% from that kind of early January peak. What am I missing?
I think this is the issue, is that the market doesn't really believe tariffs are coming in the full force that Trump has threatened. And that's totally reasonable to assume, but we're pricing very little in general. But tariff risk and the uncertainty has creeped into the U.S. data. So if you look at U.S. economic surprises, they've turned over, they're negative. That's largely because of the soft data. And that soft data is reflective of the fact that there's uncertainty, that tariffs are a downtrend on growth in the U.S., and that is showing up in the dollar in a weaker dollar. But because we start from such low sentiment elsewhere, so Europe, for example, confidence been low for a while, it's harder to have that uncertainty reflected there. So I think it's priced much more in the U.S. than it is elsewhere.
We were trying to get the dollar to parity for Tom Keene and all his European travels. That did not happen. We're sitting here at euro 1.09. How high can a euro go, do you think?
I think you're very limited in how hard you can go from here. I think part of that is fiscal is definitely a game changer, particularly from Germany. But it's largely been priced, right? As a very quick rule, you can get 25 to 30 basis points on yields from a 1% GDP fiscal expansion. We're up 40 to 50 basis points in European yields, and that's really reflected in euro dollar as well.
Within traditional analysis, do we get Canadian strength or Mexican peso strength, Mex strength, that impinges their trade dynamics? Or is that like micro analysis where it doesn't play in anymore?
I think tariffs overwhelmingly, because Canada and Mexico primarily trade with the U.S. The tariff overwhelms any kind of currency impact you have, right? Because it very much makes Canadian imports less appealing to U.S.
So where's your trade this morning? What's your single best idea on a currency pair? I need something esoteric.
Esoteric. Okay. I think something that I quite like is the yen. I like the pound as well. But the yen in particular, there's a number of cross currents that go quite well for it right now.
Let's mention one. There's no one. It's only 42 people listening. Good morning. Excuse me, 44 people. Good morning. 99.1 FM in Washington. Yen what?
Yen, I think, versus Swiss or versus the euro.
Okay. So why? I mean, what is going on with Japan? We didn't talk about Japan forever.
Yes.
Like longer than you've been around. We'd never talked about Japan. Now I got Warren Buffett talking about it. I got you people telling me about the yen and all this kind of stuff. What's going on in Japan from your perspective?
So it's both domestic and international. On the domestic front, you have growth that will come in above potential this year. And actually, it has one of the highest growth rates we anticipate in G10. At the same time, you're getting more inflationary pressures. So that means you're going to have a hawkish Bank of Japan. We see them hiking to 125. At the same time, it's less exposed to tariffs and will also benefit from the risk aversion associated with the uncertainty around tariffs and other U.S. policies.
Skylar, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Skylar Montgomery Connick with Barclays. Got to keep it short here because we got Putin, Trump, and others. But do come back again. Really appreciate it. As we had Richard Portis with us earlier, now Angela Stent at this historic moment in Russian-American relations with the Brookings Institute, with Georgetown. Her book was my book of the year a few years back, Putin's World. Angela, how does this conversation today fold in to Putin's world?
So I would say we're more or less all living in Putin's world at the moment, right? We're waiting to see what he will say. I think you have to understand that Putin is not interested in a ceasefire. Now, he said that in principle he's interested in it, but he still believes that Russia is winning, and he wants more concessions from Ukraine. President Trump obviously would like Putin to accept a ceasefire. He has said that what they're going to talk about is territories, land, the nuclear power plant. I'm assuming he means the biggest one in Europe in Zaporizhia, which the Russians now occupy.
Right.
And then he said assets. Now, I don't really know what he means by assets, but I would think that Putin's going to string him along on the ceasefire. What Putin's interested in is the restoration of U.S.-Russian relations.
Angela, Dr. Schelling, Thomas Schelling, the Nobel laureate, once told me the only way a war ends is somebody loses. Is Ukraine losing?
I think you cannot say Ukraine is losing. They're fighting back. They've lost some territory in Kursk, but they're still pushing the Russians back in one of the towns, Pokrovsk, that the Russians really wanted to take. But they're certainly not doing as well on the battlefield as they were before. They don't have all the resources that they need to win. And obviously, the U.S. has told Ukraine that they have to accept the ceasefire, and they have. And so Russia wants to portray this as it is winning. And that probably is how the war will end, if it ends.
Angela, what would be a successful call today for President Trump and the U.S.?
Great question.
Well, I think the successful call will be if President Trump can say, we agreed that a ceasefire will be imposed soon, and then we can see what they say about territory. I mean, I think the U.S. is going to lean on Ukraine to accept the loss of these 4 regions that Russia claims to have annexed, but none of which it completely controls. And then on the nuclear power plant, I wonder whether we're going to get an announcement that somehow the U.S. and Russia will jointly run this power plant. So I think for President Trump, it's coming out and saying, we are going to have a 30-day ceasefire soon.
So if you're Ukraine, does Ukraine have any role? I mean, seemingly they're not on this call today. So how does Ukraine kind of inject itself here into these discussions?
Well, I think it's very difficult for Ukraine. I mean, President Trump is going to be negotiating for Ukraine without a Ukrainian input into this. I mean, Zelensky did accept a 30-day ceasefire, complete ceasefire,
Right.
but they don't really have, as President Trump told President Zelensky in the Oval Office, they don't have too many cards at the moment. So it's unclear how much their interests will be taken into account.
I got 480 miles from Warsaw, Poland to Kyiv, and that's, of course, across all of Ukraine. I mean, the distance from Warsaw to the border is it's just like it's not even a tank of gas. What does Poland want out of this call? I'm fascinated by the adjacency, whether it's Belarus or Poland, frankly.
Yes, by the way, I've taken that train from Warsaw to Kiev, and it's a pretty long journey overnight. What the Poles want and what the Ukrainians want and what the Europeans want is our security guarantees for Ukraine when the war ends, and so that Russia is deterred from invading Ukraine again or even going further, because they fear that if Russia wins this war, can portray itself as the winner, it's not going to stop there.
Have we heard President Trump suggest security guarantees for Ukraine?
No. No.
Okay.
I mean, we've heard some vague suggestions from some of the other officials who've been talking to the Russians, but we've also heard Defense Secretary Hexas say the U.S. won't give Ukraine security guarantees. The Europeans are willing to do it, but unless the U.S. backs them up, they're not going to be strong enough.
Fisher's negative 23 here. VIX gives way to 21.33. Richard Portis of London Business School, of Oxford and Yale, with us earlier, and now the privilege from Georgetown University of Angela Stent. Her book is Putin's World. We welcome all of you worldwide on YouTube.
Angela, we talked about the role or non-role for Ukraine. How about broader Europe here? Germany, France, I mean, they have legitimate security concerns vis-a-vis Russia. I would think they'd want to have a lot of input here.
Well, of course they do, but they've been, largely excluded from these discussions. Maybe there've been some consultations, but they understand that the Trump administration really isn't interested in their input. So what they're doing is getting together, they're formulating their own policies, and they're going to try and do as much as they can to support Ukraine, again, because they see Russia as a major danger.
So again, I guess one of the issues is, again, the ultimate goals for Russia. What do you believe the 1 to 3 to 5 year goals are for Russia here?
Well, the ultimate goal is to get Ukraine to accept Russia's conditions, which is essentially a total surrender, the loss of territory that the Russians have taken since the war began, and recognizing that Crimea is gone forever, that Ukraine will promise never to join NATO, and that it will demilitarize its army. That's what the Russians want. And it's going to be interesting to see how much of that the United States is going to prevail on Ukraine to accept.
You opened Putin's World in July 2018. How much is that? That's like 8 years ago, 7 years ago. I nailed it.
Yeah, with the World Cup, right?
Yeah, Russia showed its best face to the world hosting the World Cup. The first sentence of Putin's World. What's Putin's face to the world now, Professor Stent?
Well, the Russians will certainly welcome back American investment and things like that. I think now it's, the face to the world is we're a great power. You have to take our interests into account. And, we deserve a place on the global board of directors. And you have to accept that we have maybe different interests than you, but you can't deny us that. So it's a different Putin. It's a more vengeful Putin and a Putin who's insisting on Russia's rights as a great power.
Angela, does Mr. Putin still enjoy widespread support or strong enough support from just the people of Russia for his policies?
Oh, the Russians that have remained in Russia, and don't forget 1 million have left since the war began, they broadly support his policies. But he's been in power for 25 years. Wow. The media is totally controlled by the state, and so that's what their information is. Yeah, but they do support him.
Angela, thank you so much. Angela Stent with us, my head just spinning. over this. Oh, we're going to continue. Excuse me. Thank you, Rich. Okay. I had a brain freeze there. Professor Stent, stay with us, please. I look, that was my fault, Professor Stent. I look at where we are. We're going to have a conversation. And as Paul mentioned earlier, what's the then what? Like at 4 p.m. this afternoon.
Well, either, the U.S. will be continuing to negotiate with Russia and they'll move forward on the details of a ceasefire, or they're going to have to come back and reassess what Putin said and whether he's just stalling them.
Okay, but how do we, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is surreal. Yeah. How do we from Washington implement a ceasefire without Europe, without Ukraine, without to cross the Black Sea to Turkey? How do we implement a bilateral ceasefire with Russia?
I don't know how we do it. Nobody has told anyone what the details of this is. I have no idea what the Trump administration's plan is. This is all shrouded in secrecy. I mean, we hear from President Trump and from Mr. Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, the chief negotiator, that there have been ongoing conversations. It's very hard to see how this is implemented, and then who's going to monitor it? If the U.S. isn't going to be on the ground there in Ukraine or on the Ukrainian-Russian border, how do we know what's happening there? I mean, then we'll be reliant on the Russians and the Ukrainians for information, and they may not know all of that either. So a lot of this is shrouded in major questions about how this goes forward.
So what is the role of the U.S. Secretary of State in all of this?
Well, I mean, he has been talking to his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. They met when they were in Riyadh, but the chief negotiator so far is Steve Witkoff, a successful real estate businessman, and he's been the chief one. General Kellogg has been sidelined, the one who was supposed to be doing this. He's just talking to the Ukrainians. So Secretary Rubio has a role, but it appears that it's not as important as that of Steve Witkoff.
I've got one final question, Angela Stent, and this has to go with the reported diminishment, I guess, of the Wilson Institute at Princeton University and also the Kennan Institute. How do you and your international relations community respond to some form of diminishment or literal shutdown of the Kennan Institute with all that George Kennan did about the Cold War?
Well, I think it's very regrettable. And I have an affiliation with the United States Institute of Peace that's also been working very much on these questions and has expertise, and that's literally been locked. I don't understand why it was necessary to do this. There are some very fine scholars at the Kennan Institute. And don't forget, now Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty have apparently, or they're going to be shut down. These were so important for giving real news to people in Eastern Europe, in the Soviet Union, but even since the Soviet Union collapsed, other parts of the world, Iran, in putting forward the American view of things. And to close all those things down, it really diminishes the soft power that the U.S. has.
Professor Stent, thank you so much for joining us from Georgetown University in Brookings. Angela Stent with us this morning, and Richard Portis. Thanks to Portis of London earlier. Paul, we don't have any, I don't think we have any video, any feed, we have no headlines, right?
I'm looking at the NH head to kind of keep on top of the headlines.
We're flying blind here.
Yep, as is everyone. It's presumably a private conversation, and we'll see what kind of readout we get from the White House, is what I've been told.
Have to see on that. Again, thanks to our team. To have Portis and Stent with us this morning is really the way we love to roll on this. Futures negative 22, they deteriorate, but it's just a very much calm, and I want to say a pre-Fed calm, but after the press conference tomorrow, what's going to change?
Yeah, I'm not sure a lot is going to change, because it seems like the narrative is less about the Fed in the most recent weeks and more, again, about policy changes.
Get it April 2nd.
Yes.
Like a new tranche of tariffs?
Yep.
Is how I would put that?
Yep, exactly right. And what's going to be under those tariffs, which countries will be impacted. So here we go.
One thing that does change today, dollar strength is fractional but germane. We finally have a DXY, not out to 104, but 103 0.48 as well. Paul mentioned the euro with Skylar 109.18 on the euro. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Futures Report sponsored by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing, wealth management, capital markets, investment banking. We've got futures falling this morning. The Fed kicking off its two-day meeting on interest rates. Policymakers expected to hold rates steady. Ahead of all this, we have NASDAQ futures down 0.7%, 146 points. S&P futures off about 0.5%, 28 points. Dow futures down 0.3%, 126 points. The 2-year yield 4.05%, down up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield 4.32%, up 2 basis points. And we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. Tesla among the tech stocks posting losses before the bell, set to extend this year's 41% retreat. Its shares are down 4%. Part of the reason for the fall off, its biggest competitor BYD unveiled this lineup of fast charging EVs that it says can give about 250 miles of range in just 5 minutes. So its shares are up 4% in Hong Kong. But you add to the pressure from Tesla, RBC slashed its price target on it on top of it. So that's the reason for that. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Recent low 217, 238 down to 227 is where we are right now.
40% year to date. I mean,
pre-market.
That starts to hurt.
I would state, I don't want to go into the details here. We don't have time, but it's a elegant chart, as they say. It's well behaved, unlike my offspring. Joining us right now, and really timely, is Eric Winograd, chief economist at AllianceBernstein. And you have a brilliant phrase. If you go to Dartmouth, you figure out this phrase.
Pretty smart.
Our expected uncertainty. Mathematically, that's just a really rich concept. How does our audience respond to our expected uncertainty?
Well, it is a challenge, and thank you for complimenting the phrase. I was quite pleased with that one myself. Look, it is a question not just for markets, but also for policymakers, and it's a question that the Fed is wrestling with as they move into their two-day meeting today. None of us know what is going to happen, but we all know that it's going to be volatile. We know that it is going to be uncertain, right? It is sort of a known unknown, if you will, and there isn't a great answer for that. I think from an investment perspective, you have two choices. One is to sort of stay the course and try to filter out the noise and take a medium and longer term view. The other is to try to trade the headlines. And which of those you try to do depends very much, I think, in which seat you're sitting. For us, it's much more the former, right? Trading the headlines is really hard to do. For the Fed, it has to be this idea of taking a long view because they only meet every 6 weeks. They can't go back and forth.
The giant of British history, David Cannadine, talks about cultural confidence. You have it or you don't. Like early in the Napoleonic War, Britain had lost its confidence and had found it back. Has America lost its cultural confidence, which folds into diminished nominal GDP?
Look, I'm hesitant to say that something is permanently or even durably lost, but I think that there are some foundations of our society that are wavering. And I don't even mean that in a political sense necessarily. I think the polarization makes it very difficult in a lot of ways to function as a society in the way that we're accustomed to functioning. And when you start to ask those existential questions, the way that you respond from a market perspective might be very different than what the past is. All of us in markets try to find a comparative period so that we feel we're analyzing something relative to a similar period in the past. That may not work. That often falls apart at times of regime change.
Paul, did Professor Winograd just tell us to go long?
Exactly. So, Eric, I mean, as an economist here, you think about the concerns about economic growth, the concerns about maybe higher inflation that may result from higher tariffs. We're not even sure what the tariff scenario is going to look like. I guess we have to wait to April 2nd. How do you as an economist kind of factor that into a model, for example?
So I'll tell you what I'm looking at, and it isn't necessarily the inflation from tariffs, because tariffs are not inflationary, right? They raise the price level, but the rate of change in the price level on an ongoing basis is really what we're focusing on when we talk about inflation, right? So if the price level goes up once and then doesn't go up again, then that isn't really inflationary, and that's sort of what tariffs are. They're a tax. Right? Literally a tax. So that's how they work. What we're focusing on instead is inflation expectations, because that's the way that a change in the price level becomes inflationary. If people expect that to persist, then they behave in a way that makes it come true.
Now, inflation you missed data. That was pretty clear, right? Expectations are going higher.
It was a very startling number to see the long-term inflation expectations, as measured by the University of Michigan survey, jump to 3.9%, which is higher than any period since the early 90s, higher even than when actual inflation was spiking a couple of years ago. Now, look, it's 1 month. It was a sharp jump. It is a survey that has become increasingly polarized and perhaps less reliable than it used to be. So I don't think you turn around the whole aircraft carrier on one number. But boy, I bet that got the Fed's attention.
Let's stay in this. We'll come right back. Eric Winograd, AllianceBernstein, with this brilliant conversation here about these times that we're living in. The VIX out of stick, 21.57. Futures into the opening, 25. Negative 25 as well. The dollar stronger. Lisa Matei.
Here we go. And how will the markets kick things off? Concerns growing over the U.S. economy, just talking about that. So we'll start with the S&P 500. Right now, it's down 0.4%, 23 points, 5,653. We go to the Dow, down 0.1%, 55 points at 41,776. And the NASDAQ down 0.8%, 145 points, 17,662. The two-year yield clocking in 4.05%, down up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.32%. Up 2 basis points. Have to go to commodities. COMEX gold, $3,046 an ounce. We go to Brent crude, $71 a barrel. WTI crude, $68 a barrel. The Bloomberg dollar spot index up about 0.1%. Over to the Mag 7, leading the losses this morning. That would be Tesla, down more than 3.5%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Eric Winograd with us here as we look at just simply the moment that we live in. When you talk to AllianceBernstein managers, are you marking down real GDP estimates? I mean, in the actual market economics of the moment, is there a change, a shift, diminished?
So we came into the year below consensus with our GDP forecast, which on a four-quarter basis for this year is 1.6%.
Wow.
The consensus has moved down, roughly speaking, to our number. I think the difference is that we incorporated tariffs into our baseline in the first place. We assumed roughly a 10 percentage point increase in the effective tariff rate. For whatever reason, many in the market, and actually Bloomberg had a really interesting article talking about the automotive executives yesterday who didn't seem to believe Trump when he talked about tariffs. They thought it was a negotiating ploy or a bluff. We didn't. So we already had incorporated that in. And so our growth forecast was already at 1.6%. We haven't had to mark that down yet because what has happened so far is largely in line with what we expected. But I'll tell you this, if the tariffs that go into effect April 2nd are as severe as they are expected to be, we will have to reconsider and we will have to think about marking down growth even further.
How do you feel about the consumer here? What spooked me was last week the airlines taking down their guidance there, and I kind of think of that as a consumer discretionary kind of expenditure, but they all saw it here. And how do you think about the consumer?
Yeah, I think there's good reason to expect consumption to slow as we move into the year. And again, when we're talking about a GDP forecast, this economy is still 2/3 consumption, right? So those two things are very heavily correlated. Look, the labor market is still solid. It's still generating enough income for consumers to get by, but markets are performing relatively poorly. Excess savings have been eroded. There isn't a lot of cushion there. And the news flow isn't great from a consumer perspective. You are hearing about the possibility of increased prices and tariffs and all these things. Consumer confidence numbers don't look great. So we do expect the consumer to pull back a little. I don't think that is enough based on what we have seen so far to make me think that a recession is imminent, right? But I think there's good reason, again, to expect growth to slow as the year progresses.
Brilliant brief. Thank you so much. Eric Winograd with us, AllianceBernstein, their chief economist. And I just can't say enough about these snapshots here, the different opinions that we see on where we're going. I don't hear anybody. I guess Stolfus was in, and I guess I'm going to call him a raging bull, but maybe not. Just like we've just got to go. It's literally day by day.
Yeah, it is.
Is where I am.
Again, April 2nd presumably will be an important day because we'll get a sense of scope and scale of these reciprocal tariffs. But I think, once again, we've all become smart again on tariffs and economics of tariffs. And it wasn't a thing, but now it is.
I've got nothing. I got through the aggregation of Bloomberg headlines. I got nothing on
coming out of the call.
Trump.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything leaked out. Again, what we've been told by, our producers here is we're going to wait for that readout. That's probably going to be the best source.
We'll continue to monitor it for you this morning. Dow negative 128 right now, down 0.3%. NASDAQ down 0.8%. It really takes a challenge to say the least here. I want to look at Apple because I think Apple, they've been in the news. There it is. Worst week since 2022.
Really?
That'll get your attention. Yeah. With Apple here, they're up now fractionally. 214 on Apple. That gets us out into 2025 as well. We've got dollar strength again. That's important. A 103.52 on DXY. Show you some new dollar strength. Tomorrow, 1:30 p.m., the Fed decides with new dots and more. On YouTube, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got stocks in the red. This is Investors Track the News, full from President Trump's call with Vladimir Putin today. We will keep you updated right here on Bloomberg. The NASDAQ down more than 1%, 220 points. The Dow down 0.4%, 185 points. The S&P 500 down 0.7%, or 41 points. The two-year yield, 4.05%. That's little changed. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.31%. That's up 1 basis point. COMEX Gold, higher, up 1% at $3,036 an ounce. We have Brent crude up nearly 1% at $71 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. Checking in with shares of NVIDIA ahead of CEO Jensen Huang's keynote, its annual developers conference. That's at 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Right now, those shares down 2.5%. Apple, it lost its fight at Germany's top civil court to overturn a regulator's decision to put it under those tighter antitrust scrutiny alongside other U.S. tech giants. And then finally, Singapore getting ready for a tourism boost. Lady Gaga's Mayhem Tour. Well, it incited just that, a little bit of mayhem. More than 1.6 million fans. They went online to grab those pre-sale tickets for her concerts in May. It's also expected to give a boost to revenue at Singapore Airlines. That is your Bloomberg business flash. Is it? Okay, there you go.
Man, they give you the pajamas and everything.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
cool.
the flight attendant, when you're putting on the pajamas in the bathroom, makes the bed for you, puts the seat down, puts the little mattress down, makes it, puts a little mint on your pillow.
I was
going to
ask if she put a mint
and then
on
you
your
crash
pillow.
for like 14 hours.
Not a bad flight.
Yeah.
I once went to Singapore, and to save money, I flew through Kuala Lumpur, and they had green tuxedo jackets on.
Nice.
Like my senior prom a million years ago. Every once in a while, a piece of research comes in where you just stop. I stopped with Jadrian Wooten. He's at Virginia Tech, holding court on this egg madness. To give you an update on said egg madness, the fancy blue eggs at Whole Paycheck are locking in at $12.99. They're on sale today for $11.49. Bonus round, you can actually get them. They've been out of stock along with everything else. Jadrian, wonderful to have you with us this morning. The price is down. Is the egg crisis over or soon over?
I sure hope so. So first, thank you for having me on. But it does look like prices are coming down in the right direction. The number of birds infected with egg flu has dropped at really an insane amount since January and February. We're down to only about 700,000 birds this month. Last month, it was 20 million. And so it looks like we're heading in the right direction.
Well, to Paul Sweeney's brilliant question, can't we just make more birds?
We can. So when we cull a flock, in the United States, we have some farms that have 1 million birds in them. If we have to cull the entire flock, we can, and we will replace all those birds, but it takes about 4 to 5 months for those hens to actually reach maturity and start producing eggs. So it takes a lot longer than a chicken that we might eat. A fryer is what they're called. So chickens that we eat, very different than chickens that lay eggs.
Good point there. I didn't know that. So, I mean, because you don't hear about any chicken wing shortage.
Come on, I grew up with Farm Journal, 6 a.m. Jump in here,
Exactly.
Paul.
Yes. So yeah, right. So chickens that we eat, those only take about 6 weeks to replenish. So it's much easier to, if we have to cull that flock, it's much easier to get those back online than it is an egg-laying hen farm.
So, I mean, it's interesting here. I mean, eggs are just kind of the poster child for inflation. But how do you view inflation, particularly in a world of, I don't know, I guess more and more tariffs here? Is inflation something we got to start worrying about again?
That's a hard question, I think, if you ask any economist. The problem is the uncertainty, right? And so as you think about the tariffs, especially on Mexico, we get a lot of fruits and vegetables from Mexico. That's where it's going to hit Americans, I think, the hardest, and where they're going to see it first. We're not in a market to buy a car every week, but we are in the market to buy groceries for our family every week. And so I think that's where it's going to get hit hardest. And it's just a matter of if those tariffs actually stick.
How do you think consumers are going to react here? I mean, we're already, we still feel the pain of all the inflation we've had over the last several years, particularly in the supermarket, from supply chain issues and so on and so forth. How do you think consumers are going to react to perhaps another round?
They're mad as it is. Nobody is happy with these tariffs. I think people haven't fully fleshed out exactly how big it's going to be.
Right.
They hear 20% tariffs on things, and they're not really processing, I think, that's going to happen sort of across everything they purchase, whether it's at Target, whether it's at Kroger. I think it's going to make people mad. People were expecting prices to come down for groceries, and they're about to see prices go up for groceries.
Jadrian, Lisa from Costco emails in and says, if I look at the pasture-raised heirloom eggs at $12 a dozen, and I look at the granola basic brown large grocery store chain eggs under $5 a dozen, can you tell a difference in those two eggs being a fancy professor at Virginia Tech?
So I will admit that I eat the fancy blue eggs. I heard you joking about that. But at the same time, look, I don't have kids, so I'm not trying to buy 3 dozen eggs a week. I think if you're buying 3 dozen eggs a week, the $5 eggs are probably just fine. That maybe the kids can't tell the difference. I actually do think I taste a difference between them, but I'm also only eating maybe 2 to 3 eggs a week. So
well, Lisa, Lisa Matteo's going to jump in here right now, doing 2 dozen a day. Lisa, a question for the professor from Virginia Tech.
I want to know, I mean, how high do you think these prices can get? Because I'm paying, you know, I go, let's say to Costco, I get 18 eggs for, right now it's at $8. How high can I expect it to go? I mean, when is it going to stop?
Well, so a couple months ago, it was at $8 a dozen for sort of the regular, white eggs as they were. And today they're about $4. So we're trending in the right direction. The question is, will they get down to $1 to $2 a dozen? That's going to take some time. We've been doing at least $2 a dozen for the past couple of years. So I think it's heading in the right direction.
Right.
And it's just a matter of, as long as bird flu doesn't rear its ugly head again, then we should be at least heading towards that direction. But,
Right.
2 years ago, we saw bird flu come down and then come right back again. And so these things can really swing really fast.
Don't be a stranger. Professor, thank you so much. Jadrian Wooten is with Virginia Tech.
Hokies.
He's the official egg correspondent for Bloomberg surveillance. Right now, the Dow, negative 229 points. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Trump speaks this morning with Russian President Vladimir Putin anytime now in a high-stakes call on ending the war in Ukraine. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall reports the Russian leader is already making demands ahead of the call.
Putin wants to see all weapons flows to Ukraine halted amid Bloomberg News reporting that he could really slow roll these negotiations over concerns about Western security assistance, Ukraine's neutrality, and seized territory. Now, for the most part, this White House, as you heard there from President Trump, has remained relatively optimistic, despite Vladimir Putin failing to publicly commit to that 30-day peace plan that the U.S. is backing. I spoke to one foreign policy expert who described this as a tightrope for the Kremlin, considering Moscow does want those strengthening in relations with Washington.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall at the White House. The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas appears to be over. The Israeli military launching a wave of airstrikes across the Gaza Strip this morning, hitting Hamas targets in the first major attack since the ceasefire took effect in January. Israel's United Nations ambassador, Danny Dunnan.
The Israeli Air Force initiated a series of attacks against Hamas targets in Gaza. We will show no mercy on our enemies.
Hamas said more than 400 people have been killed, while many others are missing since the airstrikes began. A major development in the case of a University of Pittsburgh student missing on spring break. The parents of Sudiksha Kunanki are now asking officials in the Dominican Republic to officially declare their daughter dead. She hasn't been seen for 12 days. Sources say her mother and father sent a letter to police acknowledging there is no evidence of foul play. And we can learn today whether authorities will release Joshua Reeby, the man believed to have last seen Kunanki on the beach. He says they were hit by a large wave. President Trump says that he is ending Secret Service protection for former President Joe Biden's son Hunter and daughter Ashley. Trump posted on social media it would begin effective immediately. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much as well. That was brilliant on the eggs.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
learned a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia Tech, they know what they're talking. That's Blacksburg, Virginia. That is beautiful country out there. Oh, man. But I don't know what a Hokie is. That's their, and I think a Hokie is the same thing as a Hoosier, which is.
Are you making fun of the Grand Canyon Lopes?
Yeah, no, I haven't gotten there yet, but I think a Hokie is just somebody who roots for Virginia Tech. And their mascot's like a turkey.
I love how you brought the fact, like, there's no chicken wing shortage.
No chicken wing shortage. I don't
Like, they're on
hear
sale
anybody
at
talking
Buffalo
about
Wild
that.
Wings.
So I was just trying to piece it all together. This whole
Goldman Sachs did a
chicken.
brilliant, like 40, 50-page walkthrough on this, and it's just about, like, what's it take to manufacture a cow or a pig or a chicken and all that. We have a moment of silence here, folks, for Lisa Matteo. How many, we'll get back. Bloomberg surveillance, good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. As Paul mentioned, the sell-off continues. I really want to say there's been a shift in the last half hour. I got a VIX out nearing two big figures, 22.22. It's not like a number of days ago, but I'm sorry, Paul, there's some angst in the market.
There's some angst in the marketplace, and the word
Tesla
we've
has
heard,
yet to get a bid.
Yeah, I'm looking at the NASDAQ trading off 1.6%, really feeling the pain there. So it's that uncertainty after the people talk
One
about.
thing we're certain of is oil's cheap, and it's so cheap nobody wants to drill. We need to get a summation here of 30 days of hard work by Alex Steele. You know, you had 42 interviews, but I'm just going to go back to Harold Hamm, who basically says drill, baby, drill is not going to happen. Is President Trump going to get drill, baby, drill?
Oh, such a complicated question. So Harold Hamm's point is that you need $80 to drill on an average basis because you need to actually make money and recoup all your costs.
Yeah.
And that some of the areas are just high cost now because the sexy, really great rock has already been drilled. So you're drilling the more difficult rock, and that needs more money in order to drill it. On the flip side, that was like jargon-less, guys. On the flip side, there are basins that are still really cheap. Also, if you talk to some analysts, they say lower corporate taxes. If you bring back the bonus deduction from the 2017 TCJA Tax Act, so basically you can write off stuff that you use and produce and that you spend, you could actually lower the break-evens by $10, which means maybe you can do drill baby drill around $45 or $50 a barrel.
Build baby build.
Build baby build, yeah.
So what are they building?
They need to build lots of pipelines. So it doesn't really matter how much oil and gas you actually drill. If you can't move it, it doesn't matter. So think of it this way. Natural gas in the Bronx, $20. Natural gas in Chicago, $3. Why? Because of pipelines.
Or lack thereof, right?
Or lack thereof, because you can't get the gas to, say, the Bronx. That's a really big issue. But man, the infrastructure and permitting is such a nightmare.
Now, is that something that can be eased?
That's something the Trump administration really wants to ease. Part of it, though, is like not in my backyard. Okay. Part of it's federal and part of it's state. So there's not so much necessarily that President Trump can actually do on that front.
How did you get into oil? Was this like you watched James Dean and Giant and you looked at Bic Benedict and said, this is cool?
No. So back in 2008, my boss was like, you're covering gold. And I was like, ugh, fine. But then 2008 and gold was like really cool because that's when gold was really taking off. So I got really into gold. The gold bugs are awesome. They love to stalk you and mess with you. It was really fun. Then I moved to gold companies. And then from there, I was like, what's this oil thing? And I remember the day that I realized there were more than one oil. I was like, what? There's Brent and a WTI? And that really like blew my tiny brain. I remember where I was. I remember who told me that. And then from there, it kind of snowballed.
Here we are.
And here we are.
If we're talking to Mike, I got a minute left. If we're talking to Mike McGlone, he's telling, and I hate to say he's been killer on Bitcoin, but the bottom line is there's this fear, having Ed Morrison, the giant, the other day, of lower oil prices. Does that permeate the industry, that there's a fear that oil slips away?
Or that the range does.
Price?
Sure, like 50 to 70 versus 60 to 80.
And they freeze up, don't they? They just don't, they're not like, let's go.
I don't know if they freeze, but making longer term capital allocations gets a lot harder and you have to really justify it.
Has EV begun to affect the marginal dynamics of oil?
Nah, maybe on the margin, but like really, if the EV stuff kind of goes away a little bit or gets pushed out, hello gasoline demand, that's going to be a bullish driver for demand.
Did you watch any of Dodgers Cubs?
Obviously, I'm a big sports fan. I really like the Cubs.
She's working on a bracket. That's what she's doing.
I'm not doing any of those things. What is the sports you speak of?
Yes, that's where we go.
I do know that's baseball, though.
That is baseball.
The 10 o'clock show's just rocking with the sports.
No, Paul will do the sports stuff. He'll just start saying stuff about sports, and I'll be like, yeah.
Would you do a bracket, and the way you do it is buy Scarlet Fu a beverage of your choice.
She's
her
choice.
I know she's awesome, but like, what if I don't care? I have to care. I have to care.
BRKT
Make me care.
go.
Make me care, Tom Keene.
You should be one of the celebrities pickers. You're a celebrity.
Okay.
You know,
you can do that.
See that on TV.
It's like so much work.
She'll probably win.
Exactly.
Alex Steele on oil, our huge value added, particularly a recent trip to Texas to CERA as well. Because of baseball, I guess it's opening day, even though it was Tokyo opening day. What do? You play Fogarty. That's all there is to it. Stay with us through the day on the Putin-Trump Talks.